What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Atheist Roundtable. We have a special episode today, and we are going to be hosting a live debate. And the topic is Christianity reasonable? So, should be a great discussion. And our two opponents this afternoon. We had a great time, first and foremost, last night with Adam. He was on the roundtable with us last night, and I had a good time. And we went for like 12 hours. No, I'm kidding. It was like 3 hours. But Adam, good to see you again, man. Thanks for being on. Tell us a little bit about you.
Thanks, man. No, I appreciate you guys having me on again. Thank you for last night. It was awesome and very fruitful. So it was a very good talk. You guys were all great, respectful, and everything. I'm glad to be on again. And Alex, thank you so much for doing this, man. Me and Alex are friends. We haven't really met in person, but we are friends. We've met each other on TikTok and we've talked a few times. So he's not my enemy. I don't plan on, we're not going to attack each other. Hopefully it doesn't get to that point, but no, it's all good. I can't wait to have this talk with us. And I just come from the stance of, I believe in Christianity. I believe what the Bible says to be true. I mean, obviously there are parts in the Bible that I believe are metaphorical. So I don't say every single word is literal and to that point, but I think it all requires context. And I'm here to defend that Christianity is a reasonable belief. And I believe that there is, depending on how you interpret evidence or what kind of evidence you're willing to accept, I believe there is overwhelming evidence to support Christianity. So that's just the stance I take, and that's about it.
Okay. And Adam, where viewers, listeners, where can they find you on the interwebs?
On YouTube, you can find me. The name's just on there, Adam Rich. You can find me on TikTok. I've been doing a lot more TikTok lately over the last 6 months or so. And the name on there is It's Adam Rich. It's all lowercase, no apostrophe, no space, just ITS Adam Rich. I'm on a lot of different social medias. I have a podcast called Really Rich. So on Instagram, I have a Really Rich podcast social. I have on Twitter. I'm not on there a whole lot, but I am on there. It's the name is Really Rich Adam. So it's one of those variations. I'm trying to zero everything into one name so it's uniform, so it's easier to find. But I would say TikTok and YouTube is probably the best as far as finding my content like this. But the podcast you can find on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or any major platform. And the name of that show is Really Rich.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think it's amazing. TikTok's brought a lot of people together.
It has. It's really guys like that.
Yeah, it's really cool. And our newest guest to the roundtable, and he'll have his own personal date coming up here soon. But the second part of the debate today, Arbadian taking the atheist position. Tell us a little about yourself, man, and how you doing today.
How's everybody doing today? Yeah, my name is Alexander. On the internet, I go by Arbadian. It's just a character name for Dungeons and Dragons. The game that I play. And my position is atheism because I am not convinced that God or gods or anything supernatural is real based on what we can observe and what we can test and verify. And that's my general position. And specifically for talking about each religion, we have to then determine what are the attributes of that religion and what are the criteria that they have to meet, and then what's the evidence that we can accept and verify in order to figure out if that religion is true or not. And that's what I generally talk about on my social media platforms. I pretty much only do TikTok. I have an Instagram, but I just upload my TikTok stuff there.
Okay. All right. So they can find you on TikTok and Instagram. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, gentlemen, let's get into it again. For those just jumping on, today's debate is Christianity reasonable? And Adam holds the affirmative. So he'll go first. He has 10 minutes for his opening. So Adam, the floor is yours.
Okay. I believe that Christianity is true. I think that there's evidence in many different types of areas. I don't think it's all just historical, just scientific, just philosophical. I think that it's like I stated before, that I believe it's more like a puzzle. I think that when you when you dump out all the puzzle pieces, it looks chaotic. It looks like there's nothing, you have no idea what it is or what it means or what you're going to see. But when you slowly start taking each individual puzzle piece and putting them together, it really lines up with what we see in science, what we see in the world today, what we see in history. And I think that there's I guess I could start with the Big Bang. You could say that, if you take the Old Testament and you take the God of the Old Testament, he consistently claims that he is omnipotent, he is omnipresent, and he's omniscient, that he knows all things. There's nothing he can't know, there's nothing he can't do, there's no time period or no place that he cannot be. And when we think of how the Big Bang got here, or how the universe got here, I should say, it's even the greatest atheist scholars and scientists all seem to think that the universe comes back to a single point. Now, there is zero evidence that we have that anything existed beforehand. However, I think regardless whether you're an atheist or a theist, you believe that there was something before the Big Bang. Now, I take the approach that God was before the Big Bang. But God was something that is timeless, spaceless, and immaterial, which is the cause of time, space, and matter. Because whatever created time, space, and matter has to be timeless, spaceless, and immaterial. So when you assume that that force is timeless, spaceless, and immaterial, that does describe God's characteristics quite well. But then you even have to take it a step further. Whatever created the universe is also powerful. Now, God claims, obviously omnipotent, he claims to be all powerful. So those four characteristics are what you would find with God. And you would also find that whatever caused the universe has also those four traits. So that alone does not lead you and say that it has to be God, but it does make the case for God. That's one little piece of evidence. Now, also, I don't think that any inanimate object, any just random thing without a mind can make or create something brand new unless something else caused it to do that. And so when you look at what caused the universe, you could say, well, something caused that. And then you would have to say, well, what caused that? And then what caused that? And I don't believe that you can have such thing as an infinite regression. I kind of got into this a little bit last night, but I'll do the best I can in a short amount of time here. You can't have infinite regression. It's not physically possible. And here's why. Because if you have a cause and then there's something that caused that and something that caused that and something that caused that, and you do that infinitely, then eventually you run into myself being a cause and yourself being a cause and everything being a cause, because you can't rule anything out. It's in you have to have infinite regression, means there has to be infinite causes. That's basically what infinite regression is. Now, if you say that there's infinite causes, then that means that my bottle of water sitting in front of me at some point has to be considered a cause, because that's part of infinite causes. That's one part of those many things. So I cannot be a cause for the entire universe. You are not a cause for the entire universe. We came much, much later. So you can't, in Aristotle, the ancient Greeks knew this. They talked about something has to be the prime mover. Eventually, when you go back enough causes, there has to be an initial starting cause. Now, whatever that cause is, had to make a choice to to create anything, because no inanimate object can just react without something causing it to react. So if you get back to there being a prime mover, it has to be a timeless, spaceless, immaterial, powerful, and I believe personal being to choose to create what we see today. Now, I'm sure Alex is going to say that it's not God, that's something else that we just don't know. And that's fine. It's okay to say that you don't know. That's an honest answer. So I have no qualms or no problems with somebody saying I don't know. But me personally, I like trying to figure out what exactly logically could cause these things. And the best explanation to cause that, in my opinion, are those 5 traits that I named. And all 5 of those traits are found within God. Now, you could say, okay, well, now you make a good case for God, but why the Christian God? And that's where it takes much more steps farther down the line. When you see the things that are written throughout the Bible, there are a lot of things that cannot be proven one way or the other. They're just, you have to either believe them or you reject them. And so when you do look at all the things that are in the Bible that can be proven, I have yet to find even one single sentence in the Bible that is proven to be false. And so that tells me, I mean, you look at it, has 40 plus authors. 66 books written over the span of about 1,500 years, possibly more. And it's written by all these different people with zero errors. Now, I know people will say that, well, there are contradictions, and I can't wait to hear them, because what I've found that people have said in the past is that, well, this contradicts this and this contradicts that. But then when you actually put things in context and you do further studying, you'll see that they do not contradict each other. It's just purely somebody else's perspective seeing one thing, and somebody else in a different perspective is seeing something else, and they write about it. But now, if you can say that, like, for instance, there's a part where somebody says that they seen two angels, somebody said they seen one angel. Well, does that mean that there was only one angel? Or does that mean that this person only happened to see one of those two angels and the other person seen two? And it's things like that. Like, another part is where they talk about 40,000 stalls for chariots, or 40,000. And then another spot, it says 4,000 stalls. Well, then if you do more context and you read how these things were set up, you'll realize that there was 40,000 stalls because that was for the horses, and the 4,000 stalls were for the chariots. And when you put them together, you see that there was 10 horses per chariot. So they don't contradict each other. They're just, one person is talking about one thing and one person's talking about another thing in a different spot. So I don't find that there are actually any proven errors. Now, there's a lot of things that are believed to be false, and that's fine, but I have yet to see anything proven to be false. And as a matter of fact, one of the bigger things about the Bible is that there are a lot of things. A lot of atheists don't know this, or haven't read into this, but there is a lot of things that are talked about in the Bible that science then did find out later. Like, for instance, it says in Isaiah 40, chapter 40, verse 22, that the earth is like it's a circle. But when you look at the actual Hebrew word that was used to represent circle, it actually meant more of a 3D variant. Now, they didn't have the term three-dimensional back then, but it also, the other term was to mean ball, like a ball shape, meaning a sphere. So they knew back then in Isaiah, which is in the Old Testament, they knew that the earth was round. But yet the world did not understand that. The world didn't believe that. And still to this day, I mean, we find flat earthers, right? We see people now to this day thinking that the earth is flat, which is absurd. Even Christians, which I think that's crazy. I think that even as a Christian, I'm saying this as nicely as I can to other Christians, read more, because the Bible does not say that the earth is flat. So, I mean, first and foremost, how could anything be flat? We see mountains, we see plains. I mean, what do you mean when you say flat exactly? Do you mean like a stage? Because it definitely doesn't say that either. So I think that I wouldn't say that the Bible has flaws. What I would say is there's a lot of Christians that have flaws, and there's a lot of misinterpretations, which is why we get a lot of the different denominations. But knowing that the things that you can prove in the Bible, like one of the other things I know that the Bible talks about long before the science has ever proven, just recently, science has found that we do have water inside the earth under the ocean floor. Now, the Bible predicts that too. It says in either Genesis or Exodus. I always get this. I could show you and link it later if you want, but it talks about the fountains of the deep breaking open. It talks about water coming up from under the ocean and raising the sea level. So they knew. I mean, it was written a long time ago that there was water under the water. But yet science just recently discovered this. So there's many things that the Bible does know ahead of time that science eventually catches up on. I touched on this a little bit last night, and I want to get into this a little because I think it's important. When we talk about the age of the universe, I don't know. I don't claim to know the exact age of the earth and the universe. All I've ever really talked about is that I find it very difficult to focus on. I find it that there's a lot of holes in evolution. Does that mean that evolution isn't true? No. That just means that I find there's a lot of things that I think are wrong with it. But this is one of the big parts about that. When we look out into the universe, we see that every planet, star, everything has some kind of a red shift. Everything is expanding and it's moving away faster and faster and faster. We have zero reason to believe it's ever going to contract. Now, it could. I'm not saying it won't, but we have no evidence and zero reason to put our belief in that it's going to eventually contract. And in that case, if everything comes back to a single point, that would be the beginning, at least of our universe, of time, space, and matter as we know it. To think that there's anything beforehand would be pure belief, and that's okay, but there's no science or evidence for that. So if I choose that, the way I look at it is God best explains why those things exist, not saying I don't know, or saying maybe it was nature, or maybe it was a multiverse, or maybe, because at this point you're just purely inserting belief, which is exactly what I'm doing. However, God logically explains those things And a random belief saying nature or science or some other force that we don't know about and maybe never will, putting your stock in that, I think, is very foolish because there is zero evidence for that. Whereas we do have a Bible, we do have Jesus, we do have the historicity of him and his resurrection. Now, there's not tons and tons of evidence of this, but there is historical writings of it, and there's many places outside the Bible that kind of affirm other things that we find in the Bible. So I don't want to ramble on too long about this. I'm sure me and Alex will get into more and more of these topics, but just to sum it up, basically, I believe that what you read in the Bible is true. I have yet to see one sentence that can be proven to be false. And therefore, the things that seem a bit crazy and far out, like a talking snake, a burning bush, all of these things, I find, yes, they do find we don't see that in science. And I could see why somebody would say, well, there's no reason to believe it. However, the only reason I believe that it happened is because two things. A, with God, obviously anything would be possible. If God exists, then obviously anything he does is not out of the realm of possibility. And two, being that everything that I've read in the Bible is either true or not proven to be false, I don't see a reason why I should stop with talking snakes or a burning bush. If God wanted to use those as a form of communication to other people, then I don't see why he couldn't do that if he is God. Now, that being said, do we have evidence for it? Absolutely not. So I totally understand why people think it's a fairy tale and it's far out and far fetched and just illogical. I understand that. And I do not knock atheists for believing that it's such a far out story, because it is. It does require a good amount of faith and belief to believe that Christianity is true. And with that, I'll concede the rest of my time to Alex.
Cool. Thank you, Adam. We appreciate that. And real quick, won't take up too much time. I just want to give a shout out to those that are in the chat section right now. So, just Jeff, one of the parts of the TART team, is with us. Otangelo, definitely not a simp. Scott Burton. I know I'm going to miss some here. I know. Yep, Loki, and then I believe I saw. Mark a Legend. Yeah, there he is. Mark a Legend's here. We got a bunch of people in here. I just want to say thank you, guys, for jumping in. And the chat section is very active. We appreciate it. But I won't take any more time. Adam, the floor is yours. You got your 10 minutes.
Me? Okay. How everybody doing today? So for me, what constitutes belief is we have to determine what are we using to base our belief on. You can use two basic methods. You can start with a top-down approach, which is called a priori, or you can start with a bottom-down or bottom-to-top approach, which is a posteriori. And this is the basic difference between theism and atheism. With theism, you start with an assumption that God did it, rather than with atheism and an a posteriori logic where you start with, we're just going to gather a bunch of evidence and we're going to draw conclusions from that evidence alone, and we're not going to make any extra assumptions on why this is happening. We're just going to let the facts speak for themselves. So when you look at the difference between religion and, say, scientific empiricism and how it describes the world and the universe, you come up with two very, very different pictures. With science and atheism in general, you look at the universe and the world around you and you determine, okay, these are the things that we can see. We can look into the night sky and we can see stars that appear to be very, very far away. And from what we can tell, light takes a certain amount of time to travel to us. Therefore, these stars need to be a certain distance away from us to be that bright and have the redshift and everything else that they have. That gives us an indication of how old the universe is. Then we can take a look at things like geology, and we can date rocks based upon radiometric isotope decay. And we can determine, with, of course, a margin of error, how old those rocks are. And that can give us an indication of how old the layers of the earth are, or how old the planet is itself. So then you take all of this information and you add it up. And what do you get? You get a description of the universe. And the description is as accurate as you can measure for it. And when you look at the universe and you look at all the things that we've figured out with physics and cosmology and geology, we don't have anything that points to a supernatural cause. What we have is just simply a universe that came into existence during the initial expansion, which is what we call the Big Bang. And that then develops into the universe that we see today with galaxies and stars and planets and us all having this conversation together on YouTube. So as far as what the first cause is, we don't actually know because we don't have enough evidence for it yet, not enough observation. But nothing we've seen points to the supernatural. So when you start inserting supernatural beliefs and supernatural causes, then you have to come up with evidence for them. And if you can't come up with any good evidence for them, like we've never seen a talking snake, we've never seen, a bush that burns and speaks and tells somebody what to do. We've never seen the sun stop in the sky like it did in the Bible. We've never seen the seas part like in the story of Moses. We've never seen somebody come back to life after they've been dead for 3 days. Without any proof of anything like that, you're adding assumptions. And by adding assumptions, you're becoming less and less logical in your conclusions and in your rationality. So to me, that's the basic fundamental reason why religion is not true, is because you're adding assumptions. By adding assumptions, you stop being logical. So taking a scientific viewpoint, you have one less assumption because you're not assuming that the supernatural exists. And until we see proof, reasonable evidence that the supernatural exists, there's no reason to believe in it. And that's my time. I'm okay with that.
Very good. Thank you, Alex. Great job opening comments, guys. And this makes for the next several minutes to be pretty interesting. So we agreed that we were going to have about a 10-minute opening statement and then really get into an open dialogue. That way a real conversation could be had and not have to worry about going back and forth on different time restraints. So we're going to take about a half hour here, 20-30 minutes. We're going to open up for dialogue. And I'll ask you, anybody that has questions, we're going to do a Q&A after this portion. So start shooting the questions off for Adam or Alex, and we'll start fielding those at the end. But gentlemen, you have about the next 30 minutes to dig into each other's statements. Let's get it.
Okay. Alex, I have one minor issue with what you said, because everything you said was very well put. But the only thing that I do not agree with that you said was when you start adding assumptions, you take away logic or you become less logical. And I don't believe that to be true, because there's plenty of things that you have to assume you're going to find or you believe that you're going to find before you ever find them. Like, for instance, we know with the laws of logic, like people say that the laws of logic are a construct in our head, and that's just not true. And I can prove that. Long before there was ever a human being on this planet, long before there was any mind of any kind on this planet, let's say there was two rocks. All right, or you can point at two rocks. There is no mind, but there was only two rocks on this planet. Now, is it logical to make the assumption that there was only two rocks on the planet, even though there was no mind there to see it or witness it? And of course, the answer is yes. If there actually was two rocks there and there were no minds, there's still two rocks. And that's a logical assumption. You can make assumptions on a lot. Like, for instance, Christopher Columbus assumed that the earth was round, and he decided to venture off to then try to prove it. Now, we find years later, we're here sitting privileged enough to be able to say that that was a good assumption. Now, lots of things that you get yourself involved. I'm sure if you're married, right? I'm sure when you first asked your wife to go on a date, or when you first asked her out, or you first asked her for her phone number, you were assuming that she may say yes, or else you wouldn't have asked. If you were assuming she was definitely going to say no, you probably wouldn't have wasted your time. So I don't think it's very illogical to make assumptions. Obviously, the grander the assumption, I can understand why you would say that it's much more unbelievable. But at the same time, I don't believe for a second that making assumptions makes it automatically less logical.
So what I think the issue with that is in every one of your examples, you had to go to something physical to test your logic on, which is what I'm pointing out as the difference between our two logical systems. You have an a priori logic where you are assuming an intent and then going to get the evidence for it. Whereas when I make an assumption, it's not based upon what I want to happen. I look at the evidence and then I see what conclusions I can draw for it. Yeah, you can say that you can make an assumption when you try and do something, but in the end, in order for something to be considered logical, there has to be a physical correlation, something real in order to make it logical. You can make a logical statement like, after a certain time, all GRU will become blue. And GRU is defined as something green. Now, everything in the world that is green is now defined as GRU because it's green, and that's the attribute of GRU. And then at a certain time, it's all supposed to change to blue. Now, there's no way to test this until you wait until that time. So it's a perfectly logical statement, but to assume it's going to happen just because you created a logical statement is an extra assumption that there's no basis for. We've never seen some undefined thing called GRU that is green, which would then encompass everything that's green, turn to blue. It'd be baffling to think that something like that could even possibly happen.
Yeah, but just because that one example doesn't pan out, does that mean all examples don't pan out?
No, but that's what I'm saying. You have to have a physical correlation. You have to have something to test. If you can't show that your logic is working, then there's no reason to think that the logic is working. Just because it makes sense in your mind, just because you can conceive of it, doesn't mean that it corresponds to something real in the physical world.
Yeah, and I would agree with that it doesn't make it automatically true. But at the same time, to say that just because you're making an assumption means that you shouldn't believe it, that I don't agree with. Like, for instance, if what I'm saying is true, if God did do all these things, then obviously my assumptions are very logical because it's true. But we don't know that it's true. We don't know for sure that it is. But you're basically making the case that if I'm assuming that it's God, or if I believe that it's God, that because I'm making an assumption that I can't prove, that makes it illogical. And the fact of the matter is that's not illogical.
It makes it less
if it
logical.
is true, then it's not illogical to believe it.
It makes it less logical.
But it's not. So it's just your opinion.
By definition,
it's illogical
when you make a logical statement,
no, it's illogical.
The least amount of assumptions is the best way to make a logical statement. When you do philosophy, you're supposed to get rid of all of your assumptions and then build up from what you can ascertain is the actual facts of the matter. And then from there, build your logic up. Like when Rene Descartes started out with cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. That is the one thing that absolutely everybody can agree on. You are here, you exist. Now you can say, how do we know if we exist? But everybody has to start with this one brute fact that we exist, we're here, we're doing this. Otherwise, it's just madness and we're not even having a conversation. So then from there, from what you can know, you then have to build up your logic. And every single time you add an assumption that can't be proven, that can't be shown to come directly from your first brute fact, I think, therefore I am, then you're stepping away from logic. Because you can start with, I think, therefore I am, therefore I can feel my body, so that my body exists. Therefore, my interactions outside of myself, I can feel pain when something hit me. That is another derivative of your previous assumptions that are already shown to be true. Now, then to go and explore the universe and what we can tell with our senses, that is how you develop a description of the universe, which is in line with reality. Then to go to first cause, well, from what we can tell, from what we can measure, first cause has to have these properties. Now, you put out as your first cause inanimate, uncaused action that is conscious, a conscious force. This is, like the best kind of argument for this. It's basically the Kalam, and it is a great argument. But to say that it has to have personal will is an added assumption. complexity can be derived from simple situations. You can see it in, the Mandelbrot set, or you can see it with the Fibonacci sequence, or you can see it with any kind of simple system, even like a water wheel that turns and the water comes straight down on it. It'll eventually hit a chaotic point where you won't be able to tell exactly which way it's going to start flipping. And it becomes incredibly complex to try and predict it. But it comes from a very simple thing. So when you have that kind of logical system and then you step away from it and you say, well, something supernatural happened. The universe was created in a certain amount of time that we can't observe, or the miracles happen, which we've never been able to confirm or observe. Then you're taking a step away from logic by adding an assumption. That's my point.
See, and once again, I totally disagree. And I'll tell you why. Because you have to make assumptions before you can prove almost anything. Especially in science, you can't use science. You wouldn't even run a scientific test unless you were assuming you were going to get a certain result. So it's not illogical to make assumptions. As a matter of fact, it's not illogical to think that whatever created time has to be timeless. Now, I can't prove that, but it's certainly not illogical to believe that, because whatever created time, whatever made time come into existence, that thing before that has to be timeless. You can't create time if it already exists. So it's not illogical to make those assumptions. It's only illogical to pretend that it's a fact. And I will give you that. It's illogical if I was to come on here and say, well, it's a fact that God did all these things because of X, Y, and Z. That would be illogical. But to make an assumption that will logically explain how things exist, that is not illogical to make that assumption, especially if it falls within that philosophy that you were talking about. Like, whatever created space obviously can't be made of space. That's an assumption. Now, I can't prove that. Clearly, nobody could. However, it's very, very logical to assume that whatever created time, space, and matter has to be timeless, spaceless, and immaterial. Otherwise, these things wouldn't begin to exist. So whatever existed before them has to not have those traits or not be restrained by those traits. And that is an assumption. And it's extremely logical. So I very much disagree with the notion that it's illogical to make us there. Once you make assumptions, it's now all of a sudden illogical. I think it's illogical if you make an assumption and claim that it's a fact. That's what I think.
I would agree with you that you have to make assumptions, but the assumption has to have some kind of reasonable basis to it. To just say that the origin of the universe is spaceless, timeless, and eternal is a logical assumption, yes. But then when you go on to state that it's a conscious thing that makes willful decisions, and then further on created humanity rather than it being the process of evolution, and then later on favored certain people over certain people and wiped out, the planet with a flood.
When you start adding extra steps, I wasn't making all those claims in that first opening argument. All I was trying to say is that the reason why I believe it is a personal force, like I said when I opened, is that no inanimate object, no rock, no gravity, no force that just does things can choose to do something new. Or will just accidentally do something. Like when I'm talking about the prime mover, I'm talking about something existing all alone. We'll call it a rock. We'll just say, just to make it easy so everyone can understand and grasp the idea, let's just say there's a rock and that's all that exists. And then all of a sudden you're basically saying that what I'm trying to say is that the rock just being there by itself with nothing else, there's nothing else anywhere, just that rock on its own isn't going to all of a sudden make a universe, time, space, matter, and all that. It's not all of a sudden going to do those things without a conscious decision being made.
I get you there.
In other words, something's not going to react without a cause. And if it is the first cause, then in order for it to act, it has to choose to act, because nothing comes before it to make it act. So that is a logical assumption, to assume that whatever created all of this is a personal mind that chose to make this happen. Now, it doesn't have to be God, the God of the Bible. Like, that's not where we're at yet. However, to say that something that doesn't have a pre-cause all of a sudden started doing stuff, but it didn't have a mind to choose to do it, well, that's an illogical assumption. Because I don't know of anything that just sits there and then all of a sudden does stuff on its own without any form of a cause or any form of science or chemicals or anything. And when we're talking about that initial first cause, we're talking about a solo force, being, entity, rock, whatever you want to call it. It's a single thing without anything else in existence. So there is no pre-cause to this. There can't be. There's nothing else that exists besides it. So if this force is timeless, spaceless, immaterial, and powerful enough to make a universe, it can't be an inanimate object that just acted on its own. It has to have a mind to make it act. If it's a solo entity of whatever, a rock, a force, whatever, if it's a solo thing, it has to choose to start this chain of events that we see today.
I would disagree with that, because by adding the complexity of a will and the personhood to choose something, you are adding more complexity to the assumptions, when it could simply be that whatever is the fundamental basis of reality has the ability to interact with itself, and then through that necessary interaction with itself, that is just a property of this fundamental force, could then cause everything we see in reality. This, of course, is an idea, my own personal idea, but if we could then find, that's what science does. They're trying to find verification for what this fundamental basis of reality is. They call it the theory of everything. And science has, reason to think that if they can figure this out and figure out what the fundamental basis of reality is, then they'll be able to see how the complexity emerges from a simpler basis. So when you put personhood in there, you're adding complexity to it, which I think is, again, an added assumption. So,
but I think it's added because it's necessary. Because, like, can you show me anywhere in science where an inanimate object just all of a sudden starts to do something on its own without some kind of a pre-cause?
If it's part of its fundamental properties that it interacts with itself, then by that fundamental reality of interacting with itself, it would cause change and fluctuation, which could then create singular points in time and space and duration, which could then be what we call a singularity. That is the initial expansion of our universe.
And that requires quite a bit of faith to come to that assumption, because there's no evidence anywhere in the history of the universe that would back that up. There is nothing that just chooses to do things on its own unless it has a mind in order to do it. And we just talked about there being at the very beginning, if there is nothing except this solo rock, to make it easy, or even gravity. We'll say gravity because I've heard Stephen Hawking say this out of his own mouth, which is just mind-blowing to me, that a guy as smart as him would say something this silly. But he said that the fact that there's the law of gravity, the law of gravity can and will make the universe come into existence on its own. Well, first off, when you're talking about nothing, or from nothing, he said, and when you're talking about a literal nothing, you're talking about a lack of anything. And
science
so
doesn't talk about that.
The fact that there is a literal nothingness, and then all of a sudden there's everything, it takes quite a bit of faith to believe that all just happened by chance, without any pre-cause or without any kind of a good explanation for what would make that happen. Gravity is just a force that just does the same thing over and over. It cannot choose to change what it does. It doesn't have a mind. The only things that can choose to do something differently is something with a mind. And so when you talk about creating all of these things, I think that it's very logical to assume that a mind chose to do it, especially with all the other things that we see, physics and laws and morality and all these other things that go with it.
Why does it have to choose if it's part of its fundamental nature that it interacts with itself, and by necessity, that interaction then causes more complex reactions to happen? Yeah, that's something that we haven't verified yet, but we do know that forces do work continuously without any kind of decision making. It's how stars are formed. It's how
something caused it ahead of time.
The fundamental force is what caused it to happen, not through any conscious will. We also have evidence that dark energy is a repulsive force that doesn't move objects so much as create space.
Yeah, dark energy expands. Dark matter is what we see in between the galaxy seeds and all that. The dark energy is what's making the universe expand outward more and more and more. Now, what I would ask is, if you'd have zero reason to believe that it's going to contract, then this is not just some cycle where the universe blows up and then comes back and blows up and comes back. Because I could side with you and say, okay, well, maybe that's just what the universe does, and therefore it just always does these things. It opens up and then comes back down. It blows up and goes back down. I could understand that, but we have zero evidence for that. We have zero reason to believe that that will ever happen. There's nothing that shows that the universe will ever contract. Everything seems to be expanding farther and farther, faster and faster. So what my question is, where is all of this coming from? And when we assume that at the beginning of the universe is the beginning of time, space, and matter, then I don't know where all of this matter would come from, or else the beginning of matter is not at the Big Bang, and in which case it throws all of this out the window. But with God, if he is the one that is making these things, it logically lines up. It makes perfect sense. He has the ability to do this. He's everlasting. He's omnipotent. He can do these things because he is God. If he can't do these things, then he's not God and he's not worth worship. So that's why it's logical for me to assume that he is the one that does this, and that he is the one that has the mind to put these things into motion. Because if you're saying that the universe just does this, well, we have no evidence that it's ever going to come back to where it was. So in other words, what it looks like is that this is the first time it's doing it. And so then you would have to tell me where you're getting these evidence that suggests that the universe just does this without a mind choosing to do it. If this is the first time.
Saying that it's the first time that it happened only works in relation to our universe. If it happens in another universe, it would be a different time frame. It wouldn't even be our time.
Well, do you have evidence for that universe?
If the fundamental basis of reality is truly infinite, then it could create an infinite amount of universes and still be infinite in itself.
I agree, but you have zero evidence that there is any other universe. That would be inserted.
That is true. But to add the assumption that it's a personal mind that did this, rather than this is just the fundamental basis of reality, because we have an
assumption too, though, Alex.
Of course it is, but it's an assumption based upon what we see in reality. We have yet to see any kind of people rising from the dead. We have yet to see it. I mean, if you just want to talk about purely first cause, if we're just talking about purely first cause, then your idea is no better than mine. But at least my idea is based upon what we can observe. We've yet to observe.
See, that's where you're wrong. That's where we're going to
God that does anything without you have. I mean, unless you want to start bringing in biblical text, like if you want to say that the Bible is something that we can show that God did, then you have to start bringing in evidence in physical reality, and then we have to scrutinize that evidence.
Yeah, but now you're making assumptions that you cannot prove, and then saying that that's a better idea than the one that actually logically makes sense.
It has one less assumption, so it would be a better logical idea,
in your opinion. But that doesn't mean it's true. See, because you're assuming
logic, if I have less assumption than you do, my idea is better.
You think that there's universes that just do this. There's no evidence at all, ever. Nobody has ever seen evidence of any kind of other universe. There is no such, you can claim all day long that there's a multiverse. Nobody has any evidence of that either. You're making assumptions you cannot prove, and then telling me that my assumption's illogical, but yours is a better explanation.
I'm not saying it's
mine involves a mind.
Less logical.
Like and see, this is the fun thing about it, is that my source that I'm saying, I know you say that it's illogical to believe that, and I get it. I understand where you're coming from. But the reason why I feel like it's more logical is not just because of the universe. It also explains why there's life and why there's consciousness. See, under your worldview, you cannot explain
why there's life and consciousness.
But you can't explain why life would start or why there's consciousness. There's no way of repeating that. There's no way of demonstrating that. But you're telling me that mine, which explains those things, is illogical, even though I can't prove it. But your assumption somehow seems logical to you, even though there's no evidence for that either. But you're a very evidence-based guy. There's no evidence for what you're saying, but you feel like your evidence is more logical than mine, even though my logic, my evidence explains the universe, life, and consciousness, and yours doesn't barely explain any of it.
Yours explains it because magic and God explains everything, because
Well,
you could
God can
just
do everything,
let
then
go
of
of an
course, yes.
explanation and not actually give any details about it. We can show every bit of the fundamental of reality that we can see so far in great detail. We know exactly how quarks, neutrons, leptons, the tau and SETI quarks, we know how all of this stuff works in
How
great
does
detail.
consciousness work?
How does consciousness is an emergent property of the complexity of the brain.
Can you prove that?
With absolute certainty, no, we can't prove that yet, but we can prove it at least with better certainty than it's a supernatural
You
thing.
think consciousness is better explained by science than a mind giving us consciousness?
Yeah.
Well, then I'd have to, again, you're going to have to show me how, because there is no evidence anywhere on the earth. Nobody has ever seen anything create consciousness. You're making another assumption, and that's okay. I'm here to I don't mind that, but the point is, it makes zero sense to me why you would be so firm on this belief that assumptions are illogical. Then tell me that mind, which perfectly logically explains everything. I know you don't believe it, but it does logically explain all of these things.
No, I'm saying that
about. But then you think that science is a better
but it
answer
doesn't give
and
you
it's
any
more logical, even though it can't explain
for it.
anything that we just talked about.
Saying that God did it and that a conscious mind did it, of course,
I'm not
gives you.
just saying God did it. I'm showing you why it makes sense that God did it. I'm
Why
not
is
just
it
saying
relevant?
God did it because I can't explain it.
How?
I'm explaining why it makes sense that God did it.
Why is it relevant if you can't show how it's happening? Just to say it poofed into existence is, yeah, you can say that, but that gives you nothing other than a good story. With science,
No, it gives you a good reason.
What is going on and how it's happening. Why is it relevant to this question until we can know what is going on and how it's happening?
No, why is actually relevant to every question. And if you're assuming that why means intent from a person, that's not what I mean by why. I mean, why does anything happen? Not who is making it happen, but why does anything happen? Why does the laws of physics exist? Why does the laws of logic exist?
This kind of conversation. So logically, we have to exist in a universe that allows for this to happen. To say that it has to be a reason for it, some inherent purpose. Okay, you can go look for a reason like that, but again, it seems irrelevant if we can't explain how it's happening and exactly.
But you can't explain how consciousness or life happened. That's the point that I'm trying to make. You are assuming that complexities and chemicals and all these things make these things happen. You have no evidence of that. As a matter of fact, we have some of the brightest minds on earth creating robots as we speak that look and talk just like us. Do they have consciousness? Has scientists ever figured out how to give them consciousness? No. So we don't know exactly what consciousness is. The greatest minds on earth don't even know exactly where it comes from or how to make it happen. We don't know. It always involves a mind making another mind, just like the evidence that I give for God making our minds.
We can show that amino acids and proteins and things like that can occur naturally in a lab and in controlled natural environments. We can show that these replication and DNA sequences, once they're already established, can then add all the complexities and all the biodiversity that we see today. We can show how this happens. So we know what is going on, and we have excellent evidence on how it is happening. To say that, oh, we need to know why it's happening or some inherent purpose to it happening is irrelevant.
That's not what I mean by why. I just told you that. That's not what I mean by why. I'm not implying why as an intent. I'm saying why as in why did this happen as far as what caused it, like what made it happen. If you throw a ball up in the air, why does it come down? Not because somebody intended it to. It's because the law of gravity makes it do that. So that's the why. You're assuming when I say why that I mean that there's an intent of a mind to do all this. When I say why, I'm saying if somebody walked up and punched you right in the face, you'd be like, why did you do that? But it's not necessary. There's a reason behind it. It doesn't necessarily mean that whenever you say why, that everything that involves in this word why has to be from a mind with intent. I mean why in the sense of, like, if I throw a ball up, why does it come down? Well, the law of gravity. That has nothing to do with a mind or an intent or a purpose.
Why just turns
out what the law is.
It's of reality. It doesn't need to have a consciousness. It could simply be the interaction of the fundamental basis of reality. That could be why everything is happening, because
I agree.
the way it works.
But I also agree that God is the one that put these laws in order, which is why we see them. Like, for instance, if we have the laws of logic or the laws of morality, it's easy to say that it's a human construct and that people decide this, but that's not true. And we know that because your idea and my idea and Oz's idea are going to be totally different. And who's to say who's right? Whose intent is right? Whose morality is right? It's not that there's a standard outside of human beings that we all know. It is virtually universally wrong to kill somebody. It's wrong to take their life. Now, why is that? Because Hitler didn't agree with that. So who's to say he's wrong if it's just a mental thing up here? If it's just our own opinion, then it doesn't make an ounce of sense to say that anybody's wrong for anything that they do. Because they could just say that they didn't agree and they just feel that their morals are different than yours. However, the fact that we all can assume that rape is wrong, pedophilia is wrong, murder is wrong, lying, cheating, stealing, all these things are wrong. We all know that they're wrong, and none of us want these things to happen. The reason for that is because there's a standard outside of human beings that make it wrong.
I agree with that.
I know you don't agree with that, but think about it. Where on earth could it come from?
Where's the
standard then?
Our own social standard.
What is the bar? Where's the bar and who set it?
It's a process of evolution that created what we consider morality.
That's false, because in evolution, you see people.
You can't say that
in the animal kingdom. I'll show you why it's wrong.
Something is true or not.
Look at the animal kingdom right now. Every single
say that idea is false, but then go against
every single animal in the animal kingdom will rape to reproduce. Correct?
No.
Can you name one animal that courts their date and
Penguins.
takes them out and gets married and then has marital sex after that to get
Penguin.
offspring? Huh?
Penguins court. They're monogamous.
Penguins will walk around and do stuff, but other than that,
they're monogamous.
When it comes time to mate, they're not sitting there with a candlelit dinner. They're not walking to their bedroom. They're not laying down together, cuddling, and then decide to procreate. Almost every single animal on the face of the planet will do what is necessary to procreate. We don't, because we know it's wrong. We know that it's inherently wrong.
All right.
Now, why?
All right, so we're gonna let's pause on the penguin. Let's pause on the penguin. So we have about 10, 15 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we get the Q&A in, okay? Because we've got a lot of good questions in there. And first and foremost, thank you guys again. Great exchange, and I think that was fitting for a round two. As soon as we can get that in, since our cliffhanger is penguins and dating.
That's a great way to leave off. Dude. I'm with it.
So that we'll jump back into it, but let me get back up here to a few of the questions I saw. Sorry, guys, I haven't pulled up and went all the way back down to the end here.
We could probably get more into the actual Christianity part than just God himself, because I think we've kind of avoided pretty much all of Christianity and talked about the laws of the universe and everything. So I didn't mean it to go that route, Alex. I apologize, but
no, it's fine.
All right. Yeah. All right. First question here, and we'll pop it up on screen. Adam is assuming we must have all the answers now instead of we may have the answers eventually, and therefore goes to God of the Gaps fallacy.
I would agree.
And I would strongly disagree. I'm not assuming we have all the answers now. I don't even think that I have all the answers, even though I'm saying all of these things. What I'm saying is that I believe that the evidence that I'm putting forth, or the reasons that I'm giving, are the best explanation. I don't think that, and when people say God of the gaps, what they're saying is that when we don't know something, we then say God. And that's not what I'm doing. I'm giving you logical reasons for why I believe that God is the reason we have all of these things. I think it's a little bit different than just saying, well, I'm not sure, therefore I think God did it. It's that I'm showing you why I think God did it. And that's why I think it exceeds beyond this God of the gaps fallacy that we say. It's and first off, I want to be very clear. Most people don't know this. Me and Alex have talked about this before. The word fallacy that people don't seem to understand is it actually means mistaken belief. And here's why you can't, anything that Alex says or I say cannot be considered a fallacy, because we don't know if it's a mistaken belief. If Alex is right, then I can't say anything he's saying is a fallacy. And if I'm right, you can't say anything that I say is a fallacy, because if it's true, then it's not a mistaken belief. So the problem that people have is that they assume that because it's a belief, that it's a fallacy that can't be proven. That's not what fallacy means. It means that you're putting your belief in something that's mistaken. So therefore, if I'm wrong, then yes, I am committing a fallacy. But if I'm right, you can't make that claim that it's a mistaken belief if my belief is 100% factual. The only problem is I can't physically prove that. So therefore, you can call it a fallacy. You can call it God of the gaps all you want. I do not agree with that at all. I feel like I'm giving you logical reasons for why I believe what I do. I'm not just saying, well, I don't know, Alex, therefore God did it. I'm not doing that. So if you want to say that that's God of the gaps, be my guest. But I firmly believe that no, that's not what I'm doing.
Well, Adam, I believe that you just committed a fallacy that was extremely fallacious. So there you go. There you go.
Right on.
Next one, we'll pull up here from Scott. Adam, why is the Christian God the right answer?
I think because first, let's make the assumption that the God of the Old Testament, that the God of the Bible is right and correct. If we can make that assumption first, which I agree with Alex, you have to start with an assumption. I think regardless what worldview you come up with, you have to start with some kind of assumption that you just can't prove. But that being said, the reason why I believe the Christian one is because, one, with the fact that what I said earlier about the Bible, if the Bible, all of these things that I've read in the Bible, the things that you can prove to be true are proven to be true, obviously. The things that you can't prove false, then you don't know if they're false. You just believe that they're false. And I understand that, but that's the fact of the matter is you can't prove that they're false. So if everything in the Bible that's proven true is true, and if everything that's in the Bible is that you can't prove true is a belief that it could be true or false, then the point that I'm getting at is the Bible has zero falsities that are proven in that book. So if that's true, if the Bible's true, then clearly that means that Jesus is the Son of God. He is God. He's part of the Trinity. But that being said, also the big thing is even take the Bible out of the picture. In history, we have many people writing about, even in that time and farther down the road later, Tacitus, Josephus, many others down the road, Constant. There's many people throughout the last 2,000 years that have written about Jesus. There were some that wrote about him in the same time. Paul was one of them. He's dated back to Corinth in 49 to 55 AD, talking about the original creed that was made with the disciples after Jesus's death and resurrection. Now, Paul was he was a Christian killer, and it went by the name Saul of Tarsus. He had some kind of an experience. You could say it's a hallucination. You could say whatever you want about it. But he did have some kind of an experience that made him go from Christian killer to one of arguably the greatest Christians of all time as far as spreading the word. They believed that Jesus did what he did and that when he died, that he resurrected. Now, was I there to see it? Nope. Do I have evidence for it? Not at all. What I do have is the fact that the Bible has zero things proven false. We have many historic writings from different parts of the world, from different people that aren't even Christian, like Josephus, who was Jewish, and Tacitus, who was Roman, both of which hated Christians. These people, their enemies, still wrote the same things. So I have a firm belief. I made a video about this recently. I said, if your mom tells you that you're good looking or that you're smart, she's probably just being nice. But if your enemy says that you're good looking or that you're smart, you probably are. And so the fact that all these enemies of Jesus then either converted, changed, the disciples themselves who were claimed to have stolen the body, if they did steal the body, then they would know that it's a lie. They would know that Jesus is not God, right? And therefore, if they did know that he is not God and they did steal the body, why on earth would they go on the run? They'd go into hiding, be imprisoned, stoned to death, put on an island. One of them hung upside down. These people all died for this supposed lie that they knew was a lie. Therefore, in my opinion, logically, I don't think anyone on earth would do something like that. I don't think anybody's going to create a lie that they know is false and then die for that lie that they know is false. They clearly believed it, as well as many other people in that time and many historians later. And that's the shortest answer I can give. Sorry, I dragged it on.
So Adam and Alex, make a note of that one, because if we get around two together, I'd love for you to discuss what was just covered there. So, and then Alex, I have a question here for you, my man. Question for Alex: is any other religion reasonable? Does the question apply to any all supernatural belief?
I don't think that any religion that has a supernatural belief in it is reasonable because we haven't shown any evidence that the supernatural exists. Now, if you could prove anything supernatural, I made a video about this myself. If you could show that magic works consistently, like if I could speak and make a fireball appear, 10 feet in front of me, 6 inches off the ground, and it's 3 inches in diameter and it has a temperature of 400 degrees, and I could do that consistently every single time, then we could show that the supernatural exists and that something is there that can get around what we know of as the laws of reality. And then you could then build your case from that point that, such and such religion is true based upon, the evidence that you have. But until you can show that something supernatural exists, I don't think that any religion is reasonable. Although some religions are better than others.
I agree.
Okay. All right. So last question, and we'll wrap. I know you guys have some things to tend to and take care of here shortly. So we'll pop this up here, and then I will wrap it after this. For Adam, fallacy tells us that a proposition can be rationally held as true, not that it is true. Do you understand the difference?
Yeah, but a fallacy is also a mistaken belief. And as I said before, look it up in the dictionary. It says plain as day, a mistaken belief. You're putting your belief in the wrong thing. It also implies that you need rational reasons to believe it. I think I've listed those. And that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make. See, I understand why people say that what I'm saying is a fallacy. I'm fully aware of that. Me and Alex have talked about this many times. I understand why it appears like it's a fallacy. The problem is a fallacy has to be a mistaken belief, and you do not know that I am wrong.
A fallacy just refers to a bad chain of reasoning. You can have a true conclusion with
exactly.
a lot of fallacy.
I 100% agree. It's a mistaken belief with bad reasoning, bad rationale, right?
Well,
but
the
I'm
belief could be
logically
true.
explaining why I believe what I do, and it could be true. So therefore, you can't know that it's a fallacy. You can say it and you can assume it, but if I'm right, imagine this for a second, Alex. Imagine that I'm actually right. Imagine that that's true. Could you still say that what I'm saying is a fallacy if I'm 100% accurate? No.
If your chain of reasoning,
you're believing it's a fallacy.
it's
So I
not
understand
good.
why you say it, but it's just not the truth. That's all.
Okay, like if you say that.
Guys, because I want to respect everybody's time. So we will get around to here, but we had certain time restraints. I want to make sure we're respecting those. So again, thank you guys for coming on, and I will email you guys, and we'll get a round 2 on the books, and we'll.
Thank you for having me, guys. Adam.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you, Alex, for doing this, dude. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was nice, man. This is fun. We should absolutely do it again.
I can't believe how quick it went by, dude. It feels like we just started.
We'll try to block out more time next time.
Yeah, we'll do a 3-hour one like that.
All right, so, take it easy, guys.
Yep. Thanks for being on, guys. Appreciate it. And for those in the chat, man, you guys were badass today. So appreciate that and hanging out with us. And we are live again at 9 p.m. tonight with the Atheist Mom. And I know I saw her in the chat there, but she's got an awesome story. And we're going to talk about her life, her journey here tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then tomorrow night, we're going to have a fun show. And if you don't know who this gentleman is, go to TikTok, go to Instagram, and check him out. It's Loya Boys. And you can find him, and he is a TikTok character, also an aspiring hip hop artist. And we're going to have some fun tomorrow night. So that'll be tomorrow, Monday night, 9 p.m. We'll go live, and that's going to be a fun one. So thanks again for joining us tonight or this afternoon, and we will see you tonight. Who's here?
Hello.
What's up, man?
I was enjoying the show.
What'd you think?
I love that now. Well, now I can't pronounce it because he hasn't said it in a while, but his username on TikTok for Alex is difficult for me to pronounce for some reason.
Arbidian?
Arbidian, yes.
Yeah.
Now I know how to say it. But I do like, I wish we had more time. I really do, because I think there's some stuff that I really wanted them to drill down, and they kind of went off on a tangent away from Christianity into stuff that really goes over my head and probably your head too, and things like that. So, I always want to get back to Christianity, or how we find truth.
There was a couple times I almost jumped in, but I felt like I already knew we were on a time constraint.
Yeah.
So I wanted to just kind of let them loose, and then next time we'll come a little more structured, where we can have some time frames and have make sure we're hitting our topics.
This is what I noticed though, and I noticed this about, I think it's human nature. So I'm not saying this is just Christians or just theists, or atheists do the same thing. But when I present an argument to you, so let's say the blood of Jesus Christ has been found in Jerusalem, and it contains an extra chromosome, Oz, okay? As a Christian, they go, wow, that's amazing. That's got to be true. It makes so much sense, right? Then you say something to a Christian that's like, hey, I don't really think the order of building the earth is correct, like in the Bible. And they're like, well, can you prove that? What evidence do you have to know that that's correct? Like all of a sudden they become the most skeptical person out there on the world whenever there's a argument that's not part of their belief. And atheists do the same thing when it comes to like, well, can you prove this or whatever? And I'm just on this path to how can we find truth? How can we know what's true for you and I to sit down and figure that out, what methods in which? And all I can see between some of these debates is the same appeals that it must be true because I assume it's true when you can't prove it's wrong, all that kind of stuff. I want it demonstratable. It should be clear as day.
And let's talk about this for a minute, because this has kind of been a topic that's been brought up a couple times, and that's the word fallacy. What's your opinion? What's your takeaway on? On that portion? I'm not educated on fallacies enough, but I know that things don't make sense to me. Like, you know what I mean? Like if you were to tell me that the Bible is true because the Bible says so, I know that doesn't make sense because I can give you another example that proves that wrong. Like the Spider-Man proved that Spider-Man's real. So I know that it's a fallacy in the sense that it can't be true if I can give you another example that is just as valid versus a scientific theory or a scientific law, things like that can be demonstrated. It doesn't matter what conditions you put on it, we get the same result and we can predict it with 100% accuracy. So we know if we mix chemical A with chemical B, we will get reaction C. And it happens every single time. Those are the type of ways that I get to truth. So I may not know the name of the logical fallacy, like the appeal to populace, the appeal to authority, like those kinds of things. I'm not studied on that kind of stuff, but I can recognize when there's a problem with someone's line by being able to bring up another example that disproves it. Okay. The one thing that we talked about, because he is, not him, the dictionary, a mistaken belief, especially one based on an unsound argument. I think that's what was the divide there between Adam and Alex, was the belief part, and then Alex applying the unsound argument part. And I think that's where the disconnect lies between the two of them. And Adam, welcome back, and maybe you can help us understand that the divide there, because I think you have to marry those two. That yes, it's a mistaken belief, but that the mistaken belief is based on the unsound argument. So how do we marry those?
Well, and I couldn't agree more. I think that now here's the problem: is if I were to say that I believe God exists because he showed me himself, then you could say, well, you have a mistaken belief. Then it would make sense that that's a fallacy, because first off, I can't show you guys. It's only something that I internally can know for myself or see for myself, and I could be wrong. So the point is, like, if I said that I believe God exists because he's the only one that could make a universe, then that would be an unsound argument. That would be a fallacy, because that would be an unreasonable way of trying to get to logic. But the fact of the matter is when I explained why I believe that God makes the most sense as far as what it believes. Now, if I'm right, this is the point that I was trying to make with Alex, is first off, you have to be able to know that my belief is wrong. You have to know that my belief is mistaken, because the one thing that is constant with the term fallacy in the dictionary is mistaken belief. Also one of unsound argument or unsound reasoning. So that being said, you have to first prove or know for sure that my belief is mistaken. You don't know that. Neither of us know that. So, I mean, to be fair, I'm not saying that I can prove that, but my point is this. If you don't know that my belief is mistaken, it wipes the word fallacy right out the dictionary regardless. It wipes it off anyway, because you don't know that my belief is mistaken. If you find out, say in 5 years, we do a science experiment, we prove God and we prove God made everything. Well, then my belief wasn't mistaken. Like if you find out everything that I said is true, then you can't say that what I'm saying is a fallacy. And so this is why I make fun of the word fallacy all the time. Like I've done TikToks about it. I make fun of people that constantly want to jab with that word fallacy, because you don't know that I'm wrong. Now, I'm not saying I know I'm right. What I'm saying is you don't know that I'm wrong. I don't know that you're wrong. So this is why you never hear me attack atheists saying you're using a fallacy. I can't possibly know if you're wrong. So therefore, I would never discredit your argument like that, because what it does is it shuts you down. As soon as you say, oh, you're committing a fallacy, well, guess what? Now there's no reason to listen. Now there's no reason to talk anymore. And so I think it's a very weak tactic when anybody, Christians do this too. I think it's a very weak tactic to throw that word fallacy at people, because unless you know I'm mistaken in my belief, you cannot use that. And when I give you logical reasons, meaning a sound argument, not an unsound rationale or unsound reasoning. When I give you some sound logic for why I believe it, if it's true and I'm giving you a sound argument, I'm definitely not committing a fallacy. So I just think it's an absurd way to approach a debate when you say you're committing this fallacy and this fallacy and this fallacy. You don't know that. What I'm saying isn't proven to be true, but it's certainly not proven to be false. So I think using that term fallacy is just a waste of everyone's time, and it shuts down the conversation.
Okay, well, in a normal conversation, I would agree. That's why I kind of personally I stay away from it. You know, not unless it's something that's just outright in your face, obvious.
Yeah, like the Spider-Man. Like Jeff hit it nail on the head, dude. Jeff hit the nail on the head with the Spider-Man thing. Well, Spider-Man is in a comic, and therefore the comic proves that Spider-Man. Well, that is certainly a fallacy. First off, we've never seen Spider-Man in real life. We've never seen anyone pretend. I mean, we've never seen anyone shooting webs at people. We have zero reason to even believe that Spider-Man actually does exist. And then to say that you believe he exists just based off the comic, that is silly. So I agree 100% with Jeff when he said that.
Okay, and not to get into a whole nother debate, but that's from the skeptic atheist point of view. That's how we view the Bible. Is they're using what's on the screen right now. That would be circular reasoning. Whether you want to throw the word fallacy in it, that's what it's a way of reasoning. And we don't think that that's how you get solidify your argument or come to a truth claim, is through arguing the Bible for the Bible. So whether you want to use the word fallacy or just say it's a bad argument, whatever, that's how we view it. Just like you can't use the Spider-Man thing.
The phrase, what can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence.
Correct.
So if you want to assert something but not back it up, and this isn't just you, but if anybody wants to assert a fact and not back it up, then I can just dismiss it and not back it up.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is why we're on here doing this and disagreeing. Like, this is why you as an atheist disagree with me as a Christian. It's not that either one of us sound, stupid or crazy or where we believe some nonsense. It's that we're not using the same. What's the right term? I'm blanking on the term here, but it's like.
Well, I fear that what you've done is, because you're a smart guy. You're good at finding patterns and putting things together. And my fear is that you're using that skill to maintain the bubble of your belief system rather than actually putting it through the same skepticism that you use against us.
Yeah.
Like if you were to apply the same level of skepticism that you have towards those claims, I think you would find yourself at a point of, I don't know if this religion's better than this religion.
Yeah. No, and I understand where you're coming from with that. And this is what, like when we were talking last night, this is why I say, like, for me, it takes very, very many puzzle pieces to be put together to even come to this conclusion at all. It's not just, well, hey, I really like the idea of heaven, so therefore I'm going to defend this. It's more that it's not just logic. It's not just history. It's not just the Bible. Like, that's why a lot of times I try to even leave the Bible out of it. Because when you're talking to an atheist, atheists don't believe in the Bible anyway. So trying to reason with them using the Bible is I don't want to say a waste of time, but sometimes you have to bring up the Bible to reinforce something that you may say because of what you've read in it. But my point is, I try to use also history, also science, also logic, and then come to a conclusion. And then I try to do the best I can to explain that to somebody else. Now, it's very difficult in this kind of format where you're asked a question and then you answer. I can't spew all of what I believe out, in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever. But I'm trying to logically show why I believe what I do, not just say that I believe it because the Bible tells me to, or that because I believe Jesus is the right one. I have many reasons for believing he's the right one, and I'm just trying to show that to somebody else. So if they call it a fallacy, then, I mean, if you don't believe in what I'm saying, then it's going to be assumed that what I'm saying is a fallacy. And let's be honest, we all assume that we're right. We all assume that our belief is correct, but that doesn't mean that we are. I mean, I could be proven wrong tomorrow. So I reserve the right to do that, to be proven wrong tomorrow. But it's just that the things that have led me to believe this, I'm trying to demonstrate them. But you're 100% right. I can't hand you, just because I assert it, doesn't mean I can hand you evidence that says, see, I told you so.
But why wouldn't you wait until it's proven?
Because I don't think because there's certain things that you can't prove.
So you're just waiting for someone to disprove it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a better way of looking at it, is if you think that God is wrong, if you think that he's false, then if you can prove that he's false, then I would be more than happy to accept that evidence. But
wanted to get, I was thinking about this the other night after we talked, and we talked about Zeus, Apollo, like those kind of gods, which we both accept are not true.
Right.
So what method should we use to disprove those gods? And then let's apply that to your God and see if we can't get to an answer.
Well, there's zero evidence for any of those other ones. Now, and I know that you would probably assume that there's zero evidence for the God that I'm speaking of, but when you do include the fact that there is a Bible, whether you believe in the Bible or not, there is some form of word about God and about Jesus. That's one thing. Then there's also the idea, the philosophy behind it of like I was saying earlier with the invention of the universe, like whatever created that has to be lacking the traits of time, space, and matter, because those came into existence. So whatever, like for instance, the first automobile was not created by an automobile. It was logically that can't happen. So whenever something comes into existence for the first time, which all the evidence we have suggests that time, space, and matter starts at the Big Bang. Now, I don't believe that there was nothing before the Big Bang, and I'm sure you guys don't either. I'm sure you believe something happened before the Big Bang as well. Now, what I'm trying to do is say that what my belief is what best explains the invention of time, space, matter, and the infinite power that is in this universe. Whatever created that is above all of those things. And so when you try to narrow down what exactly is bigger than that, it's not a rock, it's not gravity, it's not people. What is bigger than the universe? What is more powerful than the universe? What is beyond time? What is beyond space, beyond matter? And the thing to me that best describes that is God, because you have, like I was trying to say to Alex, in my opinion, there is no inanimate object that just all of a sudden does something. It has to react to a previous cause. So whatever the initial first cause is, if you don't want to say it's God, that's cool. But if whatever that initial first thing is, it then decided, because it was uninfluenced by anything else, that nothing influenced it to do anything. So clearly, for anything to just start to do something else, that we've never seen anything without a mind do that, unless it was an inanimate object that had a previous cause. Like, for instance, if I picked up a ball and threw it at you, well, the ball did something, but it was reacting to the force of me picking it up and throwing it. So therefore, no inanimate object like a ball or a rock or even gravity itself, none of those things can just all of a sudden create time, space, matter, and all that. So I just feel like what I'm saying is the best explanation, but it doesn't mean I can prove that to you. I can't force you to believe it, and I can't, and that's all.
So Adam, if I can ask you then, because that's, I'm going to say this and I'm kind of making funny too, but that's a lot of words to explain this guy, right? This God.
Well, he's a big deal.
And Well, the Bible says where there are many words, there is sin. No, I'm just kidding. I'm playing.
But the question reminds you, like what I want to get to is figuring out the formula that you use to disprove other gods, because you said that you don't believe in it until it's disproven. So therefore, we don't believe in Zeus or Apollo or Horus or any other god because it's been disproven. So back to Zeus, what method do we use to disprove Zeus?
For me, it's the idea of a created god. Zeus was created.
Okay, and how do you?
Horus, all of them were created. The only god that isn't created, and I'm not saying that he's not created because I say so. I'm saying that the God that I believe in is the only is God that is not created. So therefore, like whoever is not created, whatever God always existed and is infinite in power and infinite in knowledge and infinite in all these other things, whatever that God is, whether you want to call him Jesus, God, Yahweh, anything you want to call it, Zeus, I don't care what you call him, but whatever that God is, that's the one that I believe in.
So if I claim that Zeus is real and he's the real God, and you claim that the Christian God is the real God, how do we determine which God is true?
The one that's not created.
Well, how do we determine which one's not created?
Well, by definition, if you look at the definition of God, capital G, the God does fit that description, does fit that definition. That is part of who he is. That's part of his definition.
Use definitions to figure out which God is real.
No, I mean, it's his characteristic. I mean, I guess that maybe I'm wording it wrong, but I guess the way I'm putting it is that Zeus was a mythological story that was created by people. Same with Horus, same with Ra, same with Thor, all of these other gods. By definition, I mean, gods in the Bible, like, take it for what you want. In the Bible, he had a huge problem with people creating gods. And think about how silly, I mean, the logic behind this. Think about how absurd it is to carve wood or carve some kind of an idol and then worship that. It doesn't, to me, the idea of creating a God to believe in is absurd on every level. But the God that I'm talking about, by his own definition and his own nature and character, is uncreated. And so that's why I choose to believe in that one. It's not that I believe in him or that I can prove that he's uncreated or that he has shown that he's uncreated. I'm saying that whatever God is out there that is uncreated, that is the creator of the rest of everything, that is the one that I'm putting my faith into. Now, that's why, and the only way that he's described, or the best way that he's described, is throughout the Bible. So that's why I use all these pieces. It's not just like I take one thing but to your point though, it's not that I don't believe in Zeus because I can disprove him or anything. It's that even if he existed, he's just a God that is created by the one that I believe in, who is uncreated. And that's why I believe in that God.
I mean, I still don't see how we're disproving. Like, what method are you using to disprove Zeus? That's
the point that I'm trying to get at, is I'm not even trying to disprove Zeus. I'm saying that the fact that he was created isn't enough. So I don't care if Zeus exists. I don't believe he does. Sure. And first, we've never seen any evidence for it. The only evidence we have is a mythological story. We've never seen any effects of him. We've never seen throughout the world that the calendar has changed because of Zeus. We've never seen that. Like,
so the calendar is a way to determine if a god is true or not.
You're taking one thing I say and pretending that that's the whole story. I'm saying there's many elements, there's many layers.
So the calendar is an element.
I'm getting at is that the fact that Zeus is created, whether it's in our minds, whether it's in a storybook, whether it's by God himself, the fact that he is not the top because he was created by something else is not worship.
That? How do we know he was created by something else? Like, what methods in which do we employ to know that those gods were created?
Well, we know because we've written them. Well, not me and you, but these stories were written.
Okay.
See, there's zero.
So
the thing that
if stories
I guess
are written,
is the point is that when Jesus was here, he not only did you have a Bible that many people have read for many years that suggested God, but then when Jesus came, he also talked about the same God, claimed to be God, died, then resurrected, reaffirming that there is some form of an afterlife. There is some form of something after this. So he has given, as small as it may be, he has given some form of evidence to back this God up. There is zero evidence for any of these other gods. The
But you
Native
said
Americans did this. They had their own gods of water and wind and rain, all this stuff. There's zero evidence for these things. There is small evidence for the God that I'm talking about, but there is zero evidence for the ones that you're naming.
But what you said earlier was that you believe in your God because it can't be proven wrong. So I'm trying to get these other gods
That's
to that
not the only
state.
reason, though. That's why I've said many times, dude, it's just one piece of the puzzle. That
Sure.
is one part of why I don't believe, or why I believe in this God. It's
So
not
Zeus-
that's not the only reason.
So Zeus is wrong because of many reasons. One of them being the calendar, and another one because the stories were written down.
Sure. If that's how you want to put it, yeah.
Well, I'm
It's
just
not
saying
just
that's.
the
I want to make
calendar,
sure that I'm on
sure.
the same page with you.
You are, but you're taking little things that sound silly and attaching it to my name like I'm making ridiculous arguments. What I'm
But it's
saying
what you
is
said. I'm not putting words in
Jesus
your mouth.
changed, the calendar has been changed due to Jesus. Jesus was saying that
Okay.
he is part of the God that is in the Bible. He didn't
Okay.
change, the calendar wasn't changed for Zeus. So this is one little piece. I'm not saying that the calendar alone is enough for me. I'm
Sure.
not saying that the Bible alone is enough for me. I'm saying that all of these puzzle pieces together lead me to believe what I believe. Now, if you could disprove God, then I would be more than happy to say that I was
Well,
wrong.
that's where I want to
and
get.
that
Is
the
I want to
Bible-
get to the disproving of Zeus or Apollo
Yeah.
or the other ones.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm at.
The point is that any god of the world, any rain god and nature god and grass god, I don't care about them. They don't. First off, if you're a grass god, what does that have to do with water, trees, earth, cars, people? It doesn't mean anything. It's about grass. If you're
So
the
it has to
water
make
god,
sense.
then you're just, the point is there's many lowercase g gods, and they are absolutely irrelevant to me. Now, if you could prove that any of them existed, then maybe I would rethink some things. I guess what I'm trying to say is, just as somebody, sorry, I don't mean to drag this on, but the best way I can put it is this. There is more than enough, in my mind, more than enough evidence to support the God that I believe in. There is nowhere near any evidence or nowhere near enough evidence to support those other ones. Therefore, I choose to believe in the other one.
Okay, so real quick, if I can just ask, well, make a point and then ask a question. So, first of all, it's not on us to prove your claim wrong or prove another God claim wrong. That's the burden never is not going to fall on my shoulders because I'm not making the claim that your God exists or the next God exists, right? So to tell us, well, you prove this or don't prove this, that's not in this conversation isn't our responsibility. That would fall on your shoulders. Now, everything that you just walked through and what Jeff asked, and I think maybe this is a different way of asking that maybe it makes more sense for everybody so we can get down to an actual answer there. Walk us through your process, in your head or even physically that you've went through. What was your process of disproving or eliminating all of these other gods and coming to God of the Bible? Like what was your systematic approach
how much
eliminating
time you
that?
got? It's that's a lot. I mean, it's been a collection of things that I've done since I was a little kid up to this day that we're at right here. It's not one thing. It's not a process, I guess. It's just the more evidence I see in favor for mine, the more it shows me that the other ones are second in nature, even if they did exist. Because I do believe this. I believe that, in the story of the Bible, it does say that there's a third of the angels came down to earth because they're fallen angels. Now, people looked at them as gods. And I do believe that that's where you get a lot of these myths, where you get a lot of these gods that people believe in, is the fallen angels. So that's why I say I don't care if those quote unquote gods exist. The point is, those all were secondary behind the big one. And so it's not about me proving or disproving certain gods. And if I can listen, there's probably a million false invented gods out there. Do I need to literally take the rest of my life to individually disprove each one of them? No, because the evidence that I have for the other one is so overwhelming in my mind that I have no reason to believe that these other ones are even on par, even if they
So
did.
based on your reasoning and your process, you picked this God, and that eliminates all the other gods. Is that how we got there?
Yeah, because he would be above them. He would have sovereignty over.
So we don't need to worry about disproving the other ones. Like, disproof is not a way to find truth.
Yeah, you don't need. Well, I don't need to prove whether or not they are considered gods. What I
We don't need to disprove.
Who is the sovereign head of all of it?
No,
And
I'm glad
the one
that
I'm
I'm on the
putting
same page with you. That's where I started from. Is because it's completely ridiculous to think that I need to go through every god that's been possibly claimed
100%.
and try and disprove them in order to prove your God. What we need to focus on is the evidence that you have for proof of your God.
Yes, and I couldn't agree more.
Okay. All right. So so to recap that part of there, so we're on the same page that you use your own logical process, Adam's brain, he his life experience and all that, and through that you've decided and for you in your life that the Christian God, the Bible God, is the God, and it doesn't matter what anybody. I could have went through the same process and picked the table God. And because I went through that process, then am I still correct then?
It's a good God.
Well, I would say, why do you limit your God to just the table? Why is the table the only thing that matters? See, this is the thing: is my God encompasses everything.
But his
Those
God can do
gods
everything.
all encompass certain things, like the God of war, the God of lightning, the God of grass, the God of rain. Those are irrelevant. I mean, if those are gods.
But Adam, I could make the same argument about my table is omnipresent, all of those things, and you can't prove me wrong either. You can't prove me wrong.
Can you prove that table God exists?
Yeah, it's right here.
Where? I don't see him.
I can't turn my camera.
It's invisible.
See, but this is
My
the
mouse
point:
got it.
is that's why I said you have to take all of these things into account. See, just saying that this pillow right here is the God of all things, well, you would have to be like, well, what evidence do you have for that? And I'm laying out the little bits of evidence that I do have, but I don't have something physical that I can hand you and say, see, I told you that God exists. What I do is you have to make assumptions that you can't prove, which is what atheism does. You're making assumptions you can't prove. If you're assuming there's no God, you're making an assumption you can't prove also. That. Well, you're lacking a belief in it, which means you don't believe in it.
I'm assuming I don't know.
Well, then that would be agnostic. That's not atheist.
Now, atheism has to do you believe in a God, yes or no?
Yeah.
Then you're theist.
Yeah.
Austin, do you believe in a God, yes or no?
I don't believe a God exists.
He's an atheist.
Yeah. So then you don't believe in God.
Do you claim to know that your God is true?
I don't claim that I have facts that I can show you, but I do.
So you're an agnostic theist. Oz.
Yeah.
Do you know that there's no God or that there is a God?
I don't believe there's sufficient evidence, but I'm willing to be
He's an
proven wrong.
agnostic atheist.
Right.
As am I. So Gnosticism and atheism are two different things. But I don't claim to know or not know if there is a God. What I'm really concerned with is getting to truth and trying to figure out if any of these truth claims are real. If I can find a process that leads us to truth. And unfortunately, I can't get there with you. I haven't been able to get to how do we determine something's true. And if I take your individual puzzle pieces and lay them out, well, then you're accusing me of taking something that you've said and using it against you. And literally, I'm just trying to figure out how do we define or figure out what's true? Because I know a couple things. Human beings are error-filled. We suck. We have terrible vision. We can't remember shit. We see things. We hallucinate easily. So I can't trust you, and I can't trust myself. Those things are just not sufficient for truth.
Well, why can't you trust yourself, though?
Because I can be flawed. I can have a brain.
I mean, we're all flawed, but you don't trust your own reasoning, your own mind, your own intelligence?
Not for truth claims.
All right, do you exist?
I would think so, yeah. I can demonstrate
so why
that.
wouldn't you trust that? That's a truth claim.
Well,
why
no, it's demonstratable, though. I can show up. I can demonstrate that.
So do you only believe in things that you can demonstrate?
For the most part, yeah.
So do you believe that I have thoughts in my head?
Yeah. You're talking.
Do you believe that I have memories?
Do what now?
Do you believe that I have memories?
Yeah. You're recalling memories now. Speech is recalling memory.
Yeah, but do you see what memories? Because I can make them up. I could be lying.
See evidence of it.
No, because I could be lying.
But I wouldn't trust you telling me something that you're like, I saw Bigfoot. That's not sufficient.
If I said I was eating lunch before I got on the show, more than likely you would take my word for it, but you have no evidence to prove
I've done this exercise with people before, and I hope I don't get in trouble for this, Oz. But because we're going to start with microwaves. And you don't want to. So If I say I have a microwave, what do you need from me to prove that?
I don't care. I don't need you to prove it.
Right. Perfect. So now let's say I tell you I have a car. What would you need from me?
I don't.
What if I told you I owned an airplane, like a 747?
Okay, still.
What if I
You're
told
asking me what I need? I don't need anything from you.
Yeah, well, for you to believe it, like what would I need to give you in order for you to believe it, that I owned a 747?
Well, if I absolutely needed proof, then I would probably want you to show me it.
Like take you on the plane or give you pictures or something like that?
Yeah, or just take me to your spot and show me the keys, I don't know. Yeah.
And then, so let me say, what if I told you that I was friends with Elon Musk and he gives me rides on his SpaceX rockets to the space station?
I would probably think you're lying, but it could be true.
Okay. And then what if I told you that I have an invisible spaceship that can take me to Mars and back in less than a second?
Then I would know you're lying.
So you've applied different standards of evidence based on the claim. For you to claim that you have memories or that you had lunch, I don't need much to prove that. But you're telling me that a guy died, resurrected, came back from the dead, that he's a god, that he can create all this stuff. So I'm up at you don't, like, again, I can demonstrate that SpaceX exists. SpaceX is an actual thing and they go to the space station. It's not outside the realm of possibility that I can get on one of those and go. But it is outside the realm of possibility to believe that I have an invisible spaceship that can go to Mars. You're at the invisible spaceship level with your claim. So the evidence for that has to be higher than the calendar, than your logic, that kind of stuff. We've got to get higher than that. Something that's demonstratable, that's proven, that can be replicated. Those are the things. That's how I find truth right now.
See, I just don't believe that all things have to be demonstrated. That's the problem.
They don't, but they have to. I don't need you to demonstrate to me that you had lunch.
No, right. I'm just saying, I don't think that all things that are believed have to be demonstrated.
Well, but Adam, I think,
like, for instance,
I think the difference is
right now. I can prove it to you right now if you want.
Okay.
So I did this exercise a little bit with Alex. Before there was ever any human beings on Earth, there was X amount of rocks.
Sure.
There was nobody on Earth to ever witness it. There's no way I could claim it, but that is still 100% factual true.
Sure, because we have the evidence.
You don't need evidence. The claim is still true. You don't have the evidence because nobody was there to witness it.
No, there's rocks here now.
Yeah,
you're saying they just miraculously blew.
Then.
Well, we've never observed things just popping into existence.
That's not the point, though. The point is when it comes to the laws of logic, you can know things without ever having physical evidence to show it.
Yeah, there's evidence.
That's kind of the point that I'm making. The same thing goes with dreams. I can't physically show you what my dream was, but you would probably believe I have dreams. You can take me into a lab right now and hook up a system that would tell that I have dreams. But there's no way I could ever prove to you.
But you don't determine your truth by dreams. You're not using dreams to determine truth. Hopefully.
Well, that's why I did the logic. That's why I showed you the logic one. Logically, before there were any human beings on Earth, is it logical to assume that there were no human beings on Earth?
At some point, yes.
Okay, so nobody could prove that. Nobody could hand you or take you back there and show you. But you know that it's 100% true what I just said. And there's no evidence and no proof about that.
No, but here's what we know. We know that human beings require certain factors for life. Oxygen, right?
Sure.
A certain temperature. We are very finicky about temperature. Like 20 degrees one direction or the other, we die. So there are only certain factors in which humans can survive on this planet. And we know through the formation of this planet that we would have not survived earlier in its history. Therefore, it's safe to assume that there were no humans on this planet continually.
But once again, you just admitted the word assume.
Yes, based on the evidence.
See, the only point I'm trying to make, and I agree with you, dude. So this isn't an attack. I just want you to understand that not everything that is proven to be true can be shown or demonstrated.
But
it's a proven fact. It is a proven fact that before there was ever any human beings on this planet, there were no human beings on this planet. That's a proof. We know that to be true. Clearly, logically, it has to be true. But
we don't know that to be true
just because I could hand you to show you that. Am I right?
You can show it, yes.
And I could, but could I demonstrate it?
Yes, you can.
How could I demonstrate it since in order for me to show you anything, me and you would have to exist on this planet? There's no way I could demonstrate that.
You can show how planets form. You can show the chemical makeup of our planet, how it happens.
You're missing the point, dude. It's the laws of logic will show you things that cannot be demonstrated. Just like there is no such thing as a squared circle. You will never be able to demonstrate that, but we know without a shadow of a doubt that it could not possibly happen because those two terms are contradictory in their definitions. So
But that's just
logically,
definition. That's not a truth claim.
it doesn't matter. It's a logical claim is the point that I'm getting at. See, if you know that there are no married bachelors, it's not possible. It's not logically possible, and it will never happen. Now, could I demonstrate that to you? No. There's no chance I could demonstrate logical contradictions.
But you're talking about logic and philosophy. I'm talking about truth and what I find to be true.
What I'm telling you is true. That's the point.
But how do we decide it?
If I'm telling you that there are no squared circles, that is a logical claim, and it's true. But there's no way I could demonstrate that to you. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. You're good. And I think one of the big things that's being missed here is, yes, there. If we're going to use the stupid microwave, but there are claims that don't really require too much evidence or any evidence at all, right? But when you make an extraordinary claim, an extraordinary being a supernatural, all-powerful, all-loving God, you make that kind of a claim, that's an extraordinary claim. We now require, it's not just, hey, if you happen to have it, we now require extraordinary evidence that meets the burden of proof on that claim. That's what we're missing here. So if we're just talking about a microwave, I agree. No, I don't give two shits about your microwave, how big it is, what color it is. I don't really care, but if we're going to start talking about a God that is the creator of everything, and he gets to determine what my life looks like and whether I go to heaven or a hell, yes, I need to have, I require that extraordinary evidence to back that up. I think that's where we're struggling right here. Yes, we all agree that some things don't require it. But this specific claim needs extraordinary evidence, not just, and I'm not mocking you, but please don't take it that way, but you keep talking about the little puzzle pieces. I'm going to need, and I require more than just a couple little puzzle pieces to be able to say, okay, this claim is truth.
Yeah, no, and I 100% agree. Now, there's two things to that. A, that's not necessarily true that you have to have extraordinary evidence for extraordinary claims. You may personally require it, and that's totally fine. I understand why people say that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. For instance, the idea that the universe popped into existence from nothing, we have zero evidence for that. People claim all the time that they think there was a multiverse or something before the universe. We have no evidence of that either, but they still think it. So there's all kinds of beliefs that you're going to have that you have zero evidence for, that you can't prove to anybody, but people are going to have their own assumptions. Like, you may not know where this universe came from, and you may not even care where this universe came from. But anything that you try to claim is going to be what we have is extraordinary, and what we don't have is any kind of definition or example that can show where this universe would come from. Do you need extraordinary claims for that? Or do you need extraordinary evidence?
We're not making
Probably
the claim
not,
to know,
because most people don't have it, and they still claim it anyway.
But you're making the claim to know. We're not.
But there's a second part to this too. When I told you about all these different puzzle pieces, I'm not talking about a 5-piece puzzle or a 12-piece puzzle. I'm talking about thousands and thousands of puzzle pieces that you slowly start putting together. You need logic, you need history, you need science, you need all of these things to come together. And so to try to demonstrate all of that to you, or try to give you every single puzzle piece that I have in here or whatever, is not going to happen in like a 1 or 2 hour podcast. But what I'm telling you is that the logic of what I explained about the Big Bang and time, space, and matter, and a powerful personal being and all that, that's part of it. That's the logical side of it. Science then backs up the things that are said in the Bible. A lot of the things that are said in the Bible about the water coming up from the deep. We had no idea that there was water underneath the oceans, or that the oceans ever changed in depth, but they clearly did. And the Bible talked about it long before we ever had evidence for that. The Bible talked about there being a complete sphere long before the world ever knew about it, long before we ever had satellites to be able to physically see it and demonstrate it. We have many people talking about Jesus and the miracles that he did, and the claims, and the dying on the cross, the way that he said he was going to, the way the prophecy said, the virgin birth. We have all of these things being written down. It's not just one thing that leads me to believe in God. And there's not just 1 or 2 things that I can tell you that's going to convince you. It's all of these encompassing things. And what I guess my point is, I think it's easier instead of me trying to explain an entire encyclopedia of puzzle pieces and evidence that I feel like I have, I guess what would be easier for me, and I say this as nicely as I can, is just ask me a question that you think I couldn't answer and see what I come up with. Because I think that I don't think I have all the answers by any means, because I don't know everything. But what I am saying is that I'm not just making a God of the gaps claim. I have logical, scientific, historic reasons for believing and inserting this God belief that I have. So if you ask me something about God or about Jesus or about, like this doesn't make sense because this, it's easier for me to answer that for you than it is to try to just in 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes spell out all the evidence that I believe makes up this giant, massive 1,000-piece puzzle that gives me this image. So so when you ask me things like, "Oh, the calendar is a piece, and this guy's a piece, and extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence," I believe I'm giving extraordinary evidence. The problem is that it's not demonstrated or demonstrable or whatever. I can't demonstrate God to you. There's no way I'll ever be able to do that, because essentially, if God does live outside of time, space, and matter, like he says he does, I don't know how on earth I could possibly hand you evidence of that. All I'm trying to really do is just show you that all of these different puzzle pieces, and I understand it's way more than I've been explaining, but all of them logically do line up, and they equal what you see in science. They equal what you hear about in history. They equal what you think about in philosophy and logically. So for me, all of that coming together is what makes me believe what I do. It's not just one or two or three things. And if you said, like, if you could prove that one of those things that I've named is false, then it would really put a damper on things. But the fact of the matter is that when you say that you need extraordinary evidence for extraordinary claims, I'm trying to give it. It's just that there's so much of it that it's going to take a lot of time, and I don't want to take up the entire show rambling like I've been doing now. So,
Hey, Adam, real quick, we got a question that popped up here for you. This is from John Anthony. He's another YouTuber and frequents our show a lot. He asked, how would we differentiate a universe where all of the things are simply emergent properties of existence itself in a universe that required a God?
how would we differentiate? Like, I mean, I guess just to make sure I understand the question right, are you implying that there's more than one universe?
I'll wait to see if he answers in the chat, and I'll just ask it one more time, because I think I asked that pretty fast. How would we differentiate? You want me to read it again? Because I know I read fast.
No. I mean, I see it here at the screen. I'm just trying.
Oh,
I just
okay.
want to make sure that I answer correctly, because maybe I'm confusing.
He can read.
I didn't know if he could see it on his screen.
No, yeah. No. I mean, I guess what is he asking? I think he's asking the question that how could we know if this universe, like, how would we even be able to tell if this universe doesn't require a God, or if it does? Is how I'm taking it. Is that how you guys are reading it?
He said no.
No.
This is too deep of a question for me.
How would we differentiate the universe where we wouldn't require a God? I mean, the only way I can really answer is from what I can see, I guess, is that I'm trying to come up with or figure out a reason. Oh, wait, let's see. How do we do? Oh, that's the same thing. Okay. I guess what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out how this universe even could exist without there being a God. And I mean, because the only other option is that it's just nature, that just nature itself. But the thing about nature is that the only thing that we know about nature, like for instance, in order to use the laws of physics and to even understand science and even understand nature, is if this universe does have order to it. Because if it didn't have any order to it and things were just randomly changing all the time, if there were no laws, then we couldn't do science, because we wouldn't know when something is going to change. The fact that there is order and law in this universe, I don't know of any law anywhere ever that doesn't come from a lawgiver. I don't know of anything that gets into order without some form of an orderer, And so when I think that the universe is the way it is, it appears to be perfectly designed. Now, I'm not saying it is. I mean, I believe it is, but I'm just saying, for your sakes, I think you guys could agree. It does appear to be designed. It does appear that things have to be perfectly, like if there was, I don't know how much you guys know about the expansion argument about the gravity. if you added or subtracted the tiniest little fraction of gravity, if you added, the universe could not exist the way it does, we would not be here. And if you subtracted the smallest, tiniest little speck of gravity, if you minus a little bit, we would have never expanded enough for there to be galaxy seeds and all these things created. So it has, I mean, it appears as though everything is perfectly the
Or
right
that's just
distance,
how
the
it
right amount of
works.
gravity.
Or it
What's
wouldn't
that?
work.
Sorry.
It wouldn't work if it didn't be that way. That's like when people say like,
Right.
The planet Earth is, I mean, if we were a couple thousand miles closer to the sun or a couple 100,000 miles away from the sun, it wouldn't work. Well,
Right.
We would be some other galaxy, some other solar system somewhere else than where we are in the habitable zone. Like it's not,
Right.
We're throwing, if I were to put a target on the ground and throw 100 marbles at it, one of those marbles might land on that target. Does that mean that marble was designed to be on that target?
No, exactly. No, and I know that argument. I've heard this many times, so I know exactly where you're coming from, Jeff, with that. What I'm saying is that is also another small puzzle piece that leads me to make this claim that it comes from God. I'm not saying that one piece alone is proving it, because you just made a very good point about that. It's just like, it's the puddle theory, right? If there's a puddle that's in the water, you could say that the world formed around it, but in reality, if that world wasn't like that, it never would have formed the puddle. Or if that, that part, it's the same theory about throwing the marbles. One of them's bound to land on the bullseye. Therefore, was that one designed? No, of course not. However, all I'm trying to say is that this is again another puzzle piece that I'm now adding in that I didn't even talk about last night's show or today. That's just one other argument, the fine tuning argument. Now, you could say that, yeah, if we weren't here to observe it, or if this universe wasn't like this, we wouldn't be here to observe it. So therefore, this universe has to be perfect because we're here to observe it. What I'm saying is that is just another logical piece that I attribute to God. Now, does that mean that that is the only answer? No, of course not. But what I'm saying is the fact that we have laws, the fact that we have order, the fact that there was absolute chaos in this beginning and it came to perfect order. I can't remember he was a skeptic. It wasn't Habermas. It wasn't Strobel. One of these great atheist scholars even said himself, maybe it was Berlinski, one of them who does not believe in God, or he's at least on the fence about it. He does not call himself a Christian. Even he was talking about how perfect everything is and all the laws and the order to it, and how it does lead to believe that there is some form of an order in some form of a person who they said, they compared it like this. They said the odds of everything being this orderly and perfect from that amount of chaos in the beginning would be the exact same thing as if a tornado went into a junkyard and created a perfect 747 Boeing airplane that could fly. And we all know how absurd that sounds. So even that guy who is not a Christian, does not believe, he's skeptical about God, even he said that the amount of order that comes from that amount of chaos would be the same thing as if a tornado hit a junkyard and created a perfect running 747 Boeing airplane. And we all know how absurd that sounds. So that's another puzzle piece that leads more to me believing that God is the one that put all these things in order, along with all the other things that we've already talked about. And there's even many more, guys. We haven't even gotten into morality. I think I'm not saying I could convince you just on morality alone, but it's another puzzle piece. Consciousness, life, dreams. Evolution cannot explain dreams. There is zero reason why we have dreams or laughter. There is no evolutionary advantage to why we would have dreams or laughter. There's zero, but God, it does explain that. And so, like I said, man, it's not just a 5-piece puzzle here. There is so many layers and pieces to this puzzle that when you put them all together, what best explains that image? And to me, and I said, I fully respect your guys' beliefs and opinions and all that, but for me, that is the most logical, best explanation, is that God did all of this. It explains everything. It explains why we have consciousness and awareness to be able to even observe the world around us. It explains why there's life at all, why there's anything that lives and breathes and does anything. Evolution doesn't explain those things, and I know it doesn't claim to. Biogenesis does, but it doesn't. There is no scientific thing that can demonstrate life or consciousness. It's just belief when it comes to evolution. And so, like I said, to wrap this up, God, to me, best explains all of it, and there is zero flaws with that being the case. Or I have yet to see it, at least. That's all. So sorry for rambling, man. But like I said, I mean, when you're challenging like what I'm saying and saying it's like, a couple piece puzzle, it's not. It is so many puzzle pieces that we haven't even begun to get into, that I wish I had more time to tell you guys like all of these. I mean, I'm sure I'm even forgetting some of them, but the fact of the matter is there are so many pieces to this puzzle. So when you try to sum it up by saying, like the calendar, like I wasn't trying to take a shot at you, Jeff. I mean, I totally understand what you're doing. And you should be doing that. As a skeptic, you should be challenging my ideas. And I fully agree with that. So I don't take it personally, but it's just that I've run into so many atheists that want to take one or two things you say and summarize it like it's ridiculous. And of course, nobody would believe it then. I wouldn't either if I thought of it the way that it's described. The thing is, there are just way too many things that fully lean towards God explaining all of it than to just think random chance in nature perfectly got us to the point that we're at. That's all. I mean, I'll shut it now. So,
Well, I think Oz or Pasta was about to come in because I think they want. There's Pasta.
Hey, what's going down?
What's up, man?
Hey, man. So, hey, how did you like debating with Alex?
Oh, it was fun, dude. I like Alex a lot.
Yeah,
and I think that me and him kind of ramped it up a little bit for each other there, but it's all out of love, man. I love Alex, man. He's a good dude. I fully intend on talking to him after this. He didn't ruin our friendship. So.
Sure. How do you think it went from your perspective?
I think it went good. I think he made some good points. I understand why, where he's coming from and why he believes what he does. I just think it's as a whole, and this applies to anyone, Christians, myself included. If you are only focused on what you can demonstrate or prove or have physical evidence for, and I think I talked to you about this last night, Mike, that
Sure.
I don't believe that evidence alone or science alone or demonstration alone is going to get you all the answers. And like I said, I don't claim that I have all the answers. I just think that like I want to know as much as physically possible. And if I can find things that don't, like, the thing about it is this, is God has never led me to throw away perfectly logical, proven things and deny them. It's only caused me to question certain beliefs like evolution. And I'm not trying to get into the evolution thing, but that's just where I stand on it. When you don't have 100% facts on things, you have your beliefs allow you to change, what you'll accept as proof or whatever. But I just think personally, as a whole, God explains and logically lines everything up. Whereas it's never caused me to throw away something I know to be proven true and just deny it, knowing that it's true. It's never once conflicted with anything that I know to be true. It has only helped establish that God makes the most sense to me.
Sure. So you don't come into these debates trying to sway your opponent's position, or you're not trying to leave the position you're in. Is that correct? Are you comfortable and confident in your belief?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Have you ever got into a position where you've thought outside of the box and are open to other forms of persuasion? If somebody was to open up your mind to critical thinking in a different direction where you might not have delved into before, would you be open to that if somebody did give you some evidence?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on what we're talking about, but yeah, I mean, I'm not limited in my thinking in the way that, like, if you presented something to me right now, I would be like, well, no, it goes against the Bible. I'm not going to even look at it. Like, I'm more than what a lot of people don't realize about me is it's not that I've just always been 100% just bought into Christianity and anything that comes along that challenges. Like, I used to believe heavily in evolution.
Sure.
But then the more I've learned, the more I see that there are a lot of holes in it. There are a lot of things that can easily be inserted belief that aren't fact, but then it's taught to us as fact. So I've actually readjusted my belief on evolution as I've gotten older, because there was a time for about 10, 15 years where I was like, well, yeah, God does explain everything, but he could also use evolution.
Right.
And so I guess it just depends on what you would present, I guess. But if it logically doesn't make sense, I'm not going to buy into it, probably.
Just to spin off on the evolution thing, I was talking to Ben earlier, Ben G, who you were talking to last night.
Yeah.
I've intentionally avoided the topic of evolution. He wants to talk more to you about that subject, so maybe we can set something up for a future date with Ben.
Yeah. Yeah,
just
that'd be awesome.
Specific to evolution, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Well, we'll talk about that later. But one of the things I noticed, I was in your TikTok video earlier today, and I saw a couple of folks making comments to you saying, "Hey, good luck on the show." I guess these were delayed. Me looking at these in a delay because there were comments that were made yesterday evening prior to you coming on the show. They were like, "Good luck, man. You know, I'll pray for you and stuff," which is fine.
Yeah.
But one of the questions they said, "Hey, make sure you ask those atheist guys if God was to be revealed to them, or if God was to be proven true to them, would they believe it?" Or I'm paraphrasing. I don't know for sure exactly how it was worded. What do you think about that? And feel free to ask me that if
yeah.
I'm...
Well, no, I think I know. I mean, I don't know how they worded it, which one exactly, but I have heard this. This is brought up many times, and I do bring this up sometimes. That the
Sure.
basic question is: if Christianity was true, if you know Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? And what do you guys think? Any of you that are on right now?
I guess I'd have to better understand the question, because the way I interpret it, and you can maybe put your view in here too. The way I interpret it is, I'm hazy on the Christian term, right? But if a God was proven to be true, then I don't have a say in it anymore, right? So once it becomes factual and it's proven to be true, I don't get to disbelieve it anymore. That's just pure ignorance. So if something was presented to be true, if you tried to tell me today that cars don't exist, and I'm walking around saying there's no such thing as cars, I'm probably going to get hit by one. That's kind of it's kind of silly to say that. So if a God was to be proven true, then there's no argument. I'm no longer atheist. My atheist position disappears. Now, if that God is kind of like in a dictatorship, similar to like a government type of thing, and it's like, you have to obey me, otherwise you're going to hell, I may have a problem with that.
Okay, now let me ask you this though, and that's honest, dude. That's a great answer, actually. And if you knew God, this is why I think it's easy to say that, and I believe that you believe that. But think about this: if God actually showed up, and you knew that this guy was immensely powerful, could do anything he wanted to you,
Mm-hmm.
just like that, just snaps his fingers, you're done, and he could do anything.
Right.
Do you really believe that if he said, "Do what I say or you're going to hell," do you really believe you wouldn't do what he says?
That's honestly, that's one of those things. It's like asking me in the position I'm in right now is a different response than if it was true to me.
Right.
So if this was a real thing, he might, how do you know he couldn't control my mind to just be like, "You obey me, sir." And I'm like, "Yes,
Right.
Yes, sir, I will."
Yeah.
But I didn't like going grocery shopping anyway. So, whatever.
Right.
So I always present it with more a naturalistic view. So if it becomes a fact, it's no longer something I can deny. Ignorant people deny facts.
Absolutely.
So that's the best way I can describe it to you.
Well, and I will say this, like, and I didn't bring this up before, but I think that this is a very, very important thing about this, is that people think that with God, that he is, you have to do what he says or you're going to hell, that he doesn't, that he's just a dictator. If you read the Old Testament, he sounds very brutal, very, very, he don't play any games. And I look at it like this: if I've said this, I think I actually did a recent TikTok on this, where I said, people were asking if God knows what I think, so he would know what it takes to convince me. You hear this a lot. I'm sure maybe you've said this, maybe you've heard that before by other atheists, but they seem to say that if God knows what it would take to convince me, why doesn't he just do it? Why doesn't he show up? And I made a TikTok about why God doesn't just show up and convince the entire world. And I think if you read throughout the Bible, he's got a very consistent theme of this. He wants you to freely choose to love him. If he showed up right now in front of the entire world and just showed his power and just how massive and just strong and he can do anything, there's no one on earth who is going to look at that power. It'd be like if Superman showed up. If he showed that kind of power, people wouldn't freely choose to love him and want to trust in him and follow him. They would be feared into following him. And if that's what he wanted, he could have just made us all robots. He could have, there's no reason to have free will if you are feared into doing what he says automatically. And so I believe if you look throughout the Bible, he says things like, seek and you shall find, seek me out. I am the truth, the light. He wants you to actively, freely choose him. And this is why we got into that last night about the separation from God, what hell actually is. He is trying to reach you. Like Frank Turek said, it's funny the way he said it. He sends you cards, he sends you flowers, he tries to get a hold of you, and he just wants to have a relationship with you. But he can't force you. Love is freely given by definition. It cannot be forced. You can't force anybody to love you. And so if he wants to have a community in heaven filled with people that don't feel forced to be there, don't feel imprisoned to be there, it has to be filled with people that want to be there, that freely choose to be there. So if God showed up right now and showed everyone his power and showed that he is who he says he is, there is nobody on earth who's going to be like, oh yeah, screw him. They're all going to want to immediately do whatever he says because of fear. And that's not what God wants. Otherwise, he would have just made us all robots and not given us free will. I think what he wants more than anything is the people that are in heaven. Like Jeff, I think, asked me this last night. It was a great question. He asked, can you sin in heaven? And I think that the correct, me personally, just from what I've read, I believe the correct answer is, yes, you could sin in heaven. The angels, a third of the angels did it, and they left. Now, could you sin now is another question. And I still think the answer is yes. The problem, though, that I have with that question is that anybody who makes it to heaven now, according to Bible, scripture, all that, anybody who God allows into his presence are people that want to be there. So I don't think that when you get to heaven and you see how glorious and magnificent and loving, and you see past family members, you see friends, and you see all of this excellence, I don't know why on earth anyone would want to sin. You're going to have every single thing that you could possibly desire in heaven for you. That's the whole idea of heaven. So when you ask the question, can you sin in heaven? Absolutely yes, and you always could. I just don't think that anyone in heaven wants to.
Well, I tell you what, like if I bumped into you in another circumstance, we met on social media or whatever, so I kind of got an understanding of you. So it's not a fair thing to do. But if I bumped into you on a train and you started talking about this, and I'm foreign to religion, I do not know anything about it. I've never heard of Christianity before. I'm a layman. I know nothing, or maybe at best just the very basic facts. That to me, I would say, oh wow, that's a fantastically designed philosophy. It's very, very easy to understand. It makes sense. There's a good ending. It's quite easy to understand. You do well, you're rewarded. You don't listen, you're punished. It's quite simple. But what I take it back to is, if that was not taught to you from a book, or if it wasn't in the Bible, how would you know that? Where would you get that from other than the Bible?
Oh, and that's a good question too. What I believe is, because I've said this before, maybe not to you, but that God is, if he is who he says he is, then he is the perfect standard of righteousness and justice. And what I mean, and why I bring that up is this: there are people in remote villages, remote islands, that have never heard about Jesus. And those people, I don't believe for a second, are going to be eternally tormented in hell because they didn't even have the opportunity to know about God. God is the standard of justice. He is the standard of what is good and evil, what is right and wrong. And he himself would not punish somebody who didn't know any better. As a matter of fact, to prove that point, every child under the age of knowing, now whatever that age is, different kids learn at different ages and stuff, so I'm not going to put a date on it, but what I will say is this: when a child is innocent, a sweet little innocent child that does not know any better, if that child were to lose its life, it is a guarantee, according to the Bible, it's a guarantee that that child goes to heaven. God, no, he's not going to punish those little children because they don't know better. And I think the same applies no matter how old you are, I think that you are judged based on you are held accountable based on what knowledge level you're at, what you know. So if you never heard of Jesus, if you never heard the name of God, or you never heard the name of Jesus, you never heard about God or anything like that, and you didn't worship some false god, because that's a big problem for God too, is it's not about necessarily not even knowing about him, it's, are you worshiping a false one? And there's a very good reason for that. If he is like your dad, and your dad loves you and he wants you to, care about him because he cares about you, well, if you reject him and say, no, I like the neighbor's dad, that's my dad, well, your dad's going to be probably pretty pissed. He's not going to be happy about that. So it's, I look at it like that, is that God is going to judge you based on what you know, not it's definitely about your relationship with Jesus if you know who Jesus is. But if you've never heard about Jesus, you never heard about the Bible, if you're on some remote village island and you have no idea, he's not the type of God, according to his own word. He's not the type of God that is going to punish you or torment you for the rest of eternity. You know how long eternity is? I mean, so and
It's
that's all I'm
eternity
trying to
long.
say.
It's really eternity long. Hey,
Yeah.
Adam, one of the
Mhm.
things I get a lot of shtick for is folks I'll get this quite a bit. They'll say that I don't press the folks I talk with a lot. Well, that's not my style. I like to chat, and I think you and I have already talked about this backstage and things. I'm much more of a chatter, and I like you to be able to talk. But there's a benefit to it for both parties, because what I like is if somebody's intuitive enough, they can listen to this, they can go back and listen to it, and they can pick apart the conversation. I don't have to be talking over you, or I don't have to be demeaning you or belittling you, right? So all I simply want to do is just open up the doors to critical thinking, and make somebody aware that sometimes people, they're not wrong to hold a belief. They might just not be aware of the belief they have, myself included. Pick a topic. I'm not right about everything. So if we go back and just step back, what I asked was, how would you know about the story of Jesus and the things that are written in the Bible, if not for the Bible? And you actually were citing the Bible still. It's very difficult not to cite the Bible when you've been taught the Bible. It's very hard to do that. It's a form of indoctrination in a way. But if you can understand that that's part of the issue that atheism deals with, is when questioning logic from a theist, that's what that circular reasoning is. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person, or I don't want to argue with you about it. It's just very hard for me to leave the agnostic position when I've already studied that material. I don't buy it. I'm not in it. So I've passed it. I'm looking for something more. If you have more, then I'm on board with you. So I gotta move past the Bible.
Well, if you mind, can I respond to that? Can I?
Oh yeah,
because I think
absolutely.
Okay, because I think that the question you asked was about how could I know about Jesus outside of the Bible, right? Is that it? Did I sum it up right or no?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I muted my mic because I'm over here moving my stuff around. I think the way I worded it was, so you had gone off on quite a philosophical tangent, which is fine, and it was a type of commentary that if I would be sitting next to you and I didn't know you and I didn't know what religion was, it'd be quite easy to buy into, because it's got a happy ending. The story is, who wouldn't want that over nothing? It's that whole thing.
Right.
When you die and the lights go out, if reality really is you die, and your body gets put in the ground and that's it, or hey, you get to go to paradise and just obey the one true master and you won't go to hell. I think that's a better version, if you will. No way, in my opinion, there's no way to prove it, but the way you presented it, if I sat next to you and you told me that story, I just asked you, how did you know all that? If not for the Bible, how would you know that?
Well, and here's where I would say, like, if you're talking about God without talking about Jesus, then you could use that philosophical argument that I was saying earlier about the universe and all these things of why it would exist. Now, if you want to talk about Jesus, like how could you know about Jesus? The problem is like it's with anything else. Like, how would you know about George Washington if you didn't read history about George Washington. And when you're reading history, I mean, you could look at other historical things like what Josephus and what Tacitus have written about Jesus as well. But I guess the point that I'm getting at is it's very hard to describe Jesus and the story of the Bible without talking about the Bible. Like you almost have to use and I don't think that that's circular reasoning because of this. It's like, if I want to teach you about math, we're going to have to open a math book. I mean, I could sit there and write down numbers myself over and over, but that's going to take a very, very long time. But if you want to really dive into all the principles of math and how to do calculus and algebra and geometry, you can best find that from a book about math.
Can I
guess
just briefly explain that? Let me just explain the difference, though, because I know why that would be confusing. Okay, so, and it's similar with science. You could replace math with science too. So, let's say it's a book about ghosts, and you're referring to ghosts being true because I know ghosts are true because there's a book about ghosts. That would be like your standardized circular reasoning, right? Here's a book about ghosts. Ghosts are true because the book says it's true. Here's a book about math. Math is true because the book says it's true. Now, the difference is, if you open up the math book, there's things within the math book that you can go and test and find out for yourself that what's written in the math book turns out to be true. You can actually put forth the equations. The things in the science book are repeatable in most cases. There are some things that are just like, this is our best guess, or, as you know, you've explained science in some aspects quite correct. But those things are demonstrable in the sense of which they're written. We can't do that with a resurrection. We can't do that we can't do that with the claims of the divine. So that's basically a man from the Bronze Age talking about some stuff, or a man from whenever the New Testament was written claiming to do this stuff, that stuff that we cannot go and find out. We just take in the word of these people. So that's why the Bible is used as a circular reasoning. So that's the difference. I hope that cleared it up.
Yeah, and I understand that. But when you're talking about Jesus himself, it's obviously very hard to talk about Jesus without mentioning the Bible, because that's where he's most talked about. But at the same time, that's another reason why I brought up to Jeff earlier about the calendar. And now it's not just only the calendar, but that is a big deal if you think about it, because the calendar was changed in memory of a guy that most people don't believe existed or don't believe was even relevant. And if you look back at the history right now, take the Bible out of it. If you look back in history, the whole idea of BC and AD was before Christ and Anno Domini, which meant year of our Lord. And when you take that into account, like I said, forget the Bible. Why would anybody want to change our calendar and represent Christ and year of our Lord if that guy didn't at least exist? So first off, to me, there's no doubt in my mind that he existed. Now, whether or not you claim that he's God, now you have to take other steps. But there's no doubt in my mind, Jesus absolutely existed. A man named Jesus who lived the way he claimed he lived and died the way he died. That part we know is true. Now you can be skeptical about that, but that, to me, the evidence of it is overwhelming at this point. Now, the resurrection is the big part, the hard part.
I would agree. I would agree to a massive extent, because I think we were talking about like the universe stuff yesterday. There are some things I just don't care about. So if somebody said to me, do you think Jesus was a real thing? Because I don't really care. Same as George Washington. I don't care about him. I just take people's word on it because he's a man. It's easy to understand man existed.
Right.
So the human form of Jesus, I would concede, yes, fine, okay. But there are people who are mythicists and think that he didn't exist. And if that's the case, then they have to give you evidence, or at least a good argument as to why. So
yeah,
I'm not one of those people. I just don't know, so I don't care.
Yeah, no, and I get all that. It's just, I think that it's very. I would imagine this. I guess I would say, could you give me for two things? Could you give me any reason at all, if Jesus didn't exist, that why anyone in the world would change the calendar to represent his birthday or when he's born? Why would anybody use the worldwide calendar that we use to this day? It's 2020 years after what? And when you talk about BC, before Christ, AD, Anno Domini. Now, granted, there's a lot of atheistic scholars in science that now have changed from BC and AD to BC and C, or BCE and then CE, because they don't like to throw the religious aspect into it. So
Right.
they've changed those last letters. Now, but why did we get there in the first place? Why would Christianity at all? It would take, like I said, forget the Bible, but why would Christianity at all start outside of the story that we have heard? And I have yet to hear anybody give me any logical reason for why Christianity would start, and why we would change the calendar to represent a fictional human being that never existed, and why the entire world accepted it. So there's just not enough evidence, for me at least, to say that there is no Jesus. Now, if you don't want to believe that he's God, that's a whole other thing. And
Sure.
but I do think that it's, I mean, the nicest way I can put it is I think it's absolutely absurd to think that the man named Jesus didn't live and die by crucifixion and beating the way that it's written down. I mean, there's just too much historical written documentation and effects, the ripple effects of Christianity and the calendar and all these things, to say that he didn't exist. Now, proving the resurrection is a different story that requires different amount of evidence, things like that. But I would say that there's no doubt in my mind that the man named Jesus definitely lived and then died the way that it said that he died.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that proving something like that is probably not within our lifetime, and that's where faith comes into it. So if you're in that worldview, if you're a Christian, you're going to take what you can. So if you've accepted what's written in the Bible as your evidence for what you believe, and then the things that we would consider unfalsifiable. I don't know if you consider them that term, but I would consider a resurrection to be unfalsifiable. If you have to then fill in the gap with, well, that I'm going to have to go with faith then, because the rest of it is based on faith. That would be my opinion. Is that how you do it, or am I missing something?
Well, yes, but also logic. And here's why. And I know it sounds probably arrogant to say, I don't mean it like that, but what I do mean, why I say logic, is this. It's not just the faith part of what you're talking about. That is a big part of it, of course. You obviously have to believe that he resurrected. I don't see it today, but there's a lot of logic that is tied with this. And here's what I mean by that. Christianity started for some reason. People claimed that something magical had to have happened. Now you could explain that away by mysticism and magicians and things like that of that time. You could say that, but then you also, the big one for me, is the effect that it had on the disciples, the guys who spent every single day with this man, and then even some denied him when they said that they wouldn't. And the fact that when push comes to shove, it shows in the story that, I mean, now I have to get back into the Bible part, but this is just to explain why the logic is there, is that when these disciples, they all had flaws, they all made mistakes. And even Peter he goes, I would never deny you. And then he did it 3 times. When push came to shove, these people were scared. They went on the run. They hid. They denied him. They did all kinds of things. But then, and this was all while he was still alive, but this is the big turn of events. And this is why I say you have to use logic on this and not just faith, is that if he never did resurrect, and it's just some made up fictional thing, the disciples already proven that they would collapse in the slightest little bit of pressure when push came to shove while Jesus was still alive. Once he died and they claimed that they seen him resurrected, they then had a total change in how they lived. They not only did they go on the run and in hiding, because they could have just denied it. If think about this, I mean, use like common sense on this part. If he did die and he never resurrected, and the disciples actually stole his body just to try to lie about this, there is no way on earth a logical human being would die for this known lie. You're not going to make up a lie to people, try to spread some false nonsense story that you yourself knows is false, and then die for it. There is zero gain for that. But they obviously saw something. Now, you could say they all had hallucinations. That's okay. That's an explanation, I guess. But whatever they saw completely changed the way that they lived their lives. It created this massive outreach of what we now know as Christianity. It then rippled down farther along to create the calendar that we are using to this day worldwide. And it also made a guy named Paul, who was known to be a Christian killer, all of a sudden become a Christian. Now, logically, I can't explain any of those things by Jesus was just a man and he died and never resurrected. Clearly, they at least saw something. Now, can I prove that what they saw is true? I cannot.
Let me
But
just,
I do
I'm
believe
going
that
to
they
pop,
did see it.
Adam, I'm going to pop up Joan's comment. Joan is a avid commenter on our channel. I really respect this person. So if you don't mind, I'm going to read this because she aimed it at
Yeah.
you. She said, have you heard about people like Jim Jones and David Koresh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm not as familiar with Jim Jones. I know the name, but David Koresh, yeah, for sure. The Davidians and all that down in Waco, Texas.
I'm assuming that's aimed at what you were just describing there. Well,
yeah, but see, now they didn't see these things. They were convinced by a cult leader. That's a
Sure.
big difference.
Right.
They didn't see Jesus rise from the dead and then completely change their lives. These were people that were manipulated by a cult leader that was like Charles Manson. Charles Manson did the same thing. So I'm very aware that people can be deceived. But the reason why I bring up the disciples, this is very important. The reason the disciples were such a big deal is because these weren't guys that were deceived by a guy like David Koresh. They proved that when push come to shove, they would deny him and that they were scared and they didn't agree that, or they had doubts in their faith in him before he died. They proved that before Jesus died.
Well, you and I,
after he died, they completely changed what they did. So what exactly did they see after Jesus's death to then fall into this cult leading like David Koresh would do?
Sure.
That doesn't logically line up for me.
Well, I'll tell you what. You and I are about the same age. I'll admit I'm a little bit older, just a little bit, just a teeny tiny, tiny tad. But let's play a logical game for a second, right? Well, do a logical.
And sorry to interrupt, but after that, though, I gotta wrap it up.
Perfect. This is just it. This is just it, and then you can hang up on me. So logic, but we'll come at it from slightly different angles because I've not gotten any type of biblical background. I've done a little bit of research on it, for the more recent years for doing stuff like this, but I didn't grow up with a Bible in my belt. So logic to me might come across slightly different. We're both using logic, right? So you've gotten to where you've gotten. So logic to me would be, if I'm presented with what you just said, I'm going to run through my logical process and go through epistemology to get to, I just haven't got a clue, but I would just say, I don't know. I would just get to, I don't know. I don't know would be the more logical answer for me.
Right.
Then it's got to, not only is it got to be a God, it's just so happened to be the God of the book that I was raised on. So it's like so your logic seems biased to me.
I don't see how it would, because I've given you reasons outside of faith and the Bible for why my logic is grounded in those assertions that I'm making. See, it's not that I'm just saying that I'm not just trying to make excuses for God. I'm actually showing why and how these things could line up the way they do. So
I don't even think that. I honestly don't think that stuff. I think you went too far with that. I just think like just simple logic, what's more, this is simple logic. What is more likely, right? Exactly. What is more like, what do we know in the natural world? What are the natural things that occur?
Right.
People don't come back to life.
Right.
So right there, I'm skeptical at the jump, that right there. So skeptical. So we go through the process. It's going to lead. So I know you're in a rush. So it's going to lead me to just, I don't know. I'm not educated enough to know anything about the supernatural. And I haven't got a time machine. I can't go back to the Bronze Age. I can't really describe. I know bushes can't talk. So all this stuff to me is illogical. It's kind of the opposite of logic. So using logic to me is going to lead me to, I don't know at best. Now, I'd be ignorant to say I have absolute certainty on something. Yeah. But then even if I got to a God, even if it was like a God did it, I still would be like, I've also now gotten to the God of the Christian Bible. And then to me, it just doesn't, it kind of lacks logic to me. But that's my opinion.
Well, let me explain, if you don't mind. Let me show you why
Sure.
I agree. Here's the big disconnect. Now, you said yourself you didn't grow up in like in a church. You didn't have a Bible. You did, or, you know, you weren't a big. You're not super knowledgeable or whatever in the Bible. I'm sure you know some things or whatever, but
Yeah.
it's not your specialty.
Sure.
That,
I agree with that.
and so here's the thing: is like, I know it's considered God of the gaps, but here's what you have to understand: is that, think about it like this: if God could create the entire universe, if God exists and he did create the entire universe, he's capable of doing that. If that's true, then creating a human life is nothing. If creating the universe is easy for him to do, if he can do that, then creating a life is not a problem. If creating a life is not a problem and creating the universe is not a problem, then for me, and I understand that it's because we don't see it in science, it doesn't logically seem to fit what we see in science, but that is the definition of a miracle: is things that we can't explain scientifically, things that seem to break the laws of physics or break what we seem to know about the world that we live in or the world around us. So any miracle is going to defy what we know about science. But the big key about this, though, is that if God is true, and if God created the universe, if God created people, and if all of these things that I'm saying is true, then any of those things that I named that were in the Bible that don't seem logical or don't seem like they could happen, they now become easily done by the God that created all things. So it's, I guess where we're coming from is, you're coming from the stance of you rely more on science. You're not a religious guy. You're not coming from that background. So in that aspect, I totally understand why a talking bush or a talking snake, would not be logical. However, if God is true, then all of those things become logically possible. Now, does that mean that it's a guarantee that they happen? No, of course not. And I could never, by definition, a miracle is something that we don't see every day and we can't explain with science. So therefore, I couldn't scientifically show you how a snake could talk, or how a burning bush could talk, or anything like that. However, if God is capable of doing all of these things, then those things do become at least logically possible because of God. And so that's why, to me, it is logical. But coming from your standpoint, I totally understand why you would say it's not. I understand you don't see that in nature, so therefore it's not logical to assume it happened then. However, if you do have God, if he does exist, then anything that you can think of becomes a logical possibility.
Okay.
It's just I couldn't prove it.
I think you made a great point that I wasn't thinking about. So if I was I was starting from the null hypothesis. So if I was starting from if a God exists,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're like, now apply logic.
Right.
How what happens if I end up as a Hindu?
You could. Many people do. It's just, like I said, I hate to keep saying the same thing over, but that's why I can keep going back to this puzzle piece thing, because I think that Hindus religion is more about comfort. I believe there's reincarnation in Hindu. If I'm correct, maybe it's Buddhism. Maybe I'm getting the two mixed up. So I don't mean to. I'm not trying to, be disrespectful to the religions or whatever. But
totally fine.
But the point is that if you look at any other religion, they don't have as many evidences. They don't have as many puzzle pieces that logically line everything up. And I guess for me, it's not just that I believe in Christianity because I was born or raised into it or whatever. I have done the most, I can't begin to explain to you how much extensive research I have done to verify these evidences. Me and you talked about this last night, about how anytime I had a question, I would ask my dad, and my dad, if he didn't have an answer, I would basically demand that he goes and finds one. Not that he just makes one up, but that he goes and finds one. And they have to logically line up. That's important to me. Logic and wisdom has always been extremely important to me. And the idea that these things do logically line up in Christianity, they don't line up like that in other religions the way that it seems to in Christianity. And the fact that in that Bible there is not a proven false statement, it's very compelling. And it's just hard for me to just deny all of that.
Dude, I seriously am. I'm not gonna put you on blast, but I really am appreciative of your time these last 2 days, man. And you were welcome anytime. I'm going to set that up with you and Ben for the two of you guys. We'll keep it. We'll do like an hour show or something. But Ben was emailing me earlier. But Adam, Rich, man, just before we wrap, I'm going to hit this end button here. Could you just tell me and anyone else that's listening, what do you classify as bad or poor reasoning?
I would say I think it kind of requires two things. It requires one, just believing just because you want to. I guess bad reasoning would be believing in something just because you want to, not because there's any form of evidence or any logical reason for it, but just you want it to be true. Like, for instance, a kid believing in Santa Claus, right? And I hope no kids are watching this right now.
No, I don't.
But the point is, any child believing in Santa Claus, we know as adults that that's bad reasoning. They believe it sounds nice, it sounds great. The tooth fairy thing, right? You put a tooth under your pillow and they leave you money. That's awesome to believe when you're a child. But when you get older and then you see the laws of physics show that you don't just leave stuff under your pillow and money appears, and you see, like, it's hard to just sum that up in one term. But basically, I guess anything that you believe because you just want to, and there is no puzzle pieces, there is no logic, then I think that that's bad reasoning. I think if you can logically make sense of what you believe, that is good reasoning, even if it's false. See, you can have good reasoning and still be wrong. And so I do believe that if you apply if things logically make sense, then I do believe you have good reason to believe it. But that's not the only thing you need. And that's why I say consistently, you need history, science, logic, philosophy. You need all of it. You can't just take one of these they're major elements. And so, yeah, I think if it doesn't logically make sense, it's basically bad reasoning.
There you go. Hey, I think you and I would agree 100% on that definition, my friend. Adam, I'll fist bump you through the screen, man. Plow. Appreciate it, brother.
Yeah, dude. No, I appreciate you having me on again, man. You guys have been awesome, and I would be honored and grateful to come back anytime you guys want to have me, man.
Oh yeah, we'll be doing that thing with Ben. I'll probably have Austin do the moderation again. He's such a gentleman tonight. So
thank you.
And you've met Ben, so Ben's going to chat with you about evolution. I think he wants to talk about by natural selection, that type.
Yeah, that'd be great. And real quick before I forget, do you know? Because I tried looking up on TikTok, there are so many Benjis. What is his TikTok name on there?
Yeah, when I get done, I'll tag you in one of his videos. But it's Ben G for golf atheist.
Oh, Benji atheist. Okay, I'll find that. Yeah.
He wanted to make sure everyone knew he was an atheist. So he put atheist.
And look here, guys. Anyone watching this? Shout out to Benji atheist, right? I
mean, he is a beast, man.
I like all of you guys have been great, dude. And Jeff is awesome too, man. I know he gets passionate and stuff too, and so do I sometimes. So, but it's all respect, it's all appreciation, man. I love all you guys. You guys have been awesome. So I appreciate you even having me on.
You know, Jeff wears a wig, right? That's a hairpiece that he puts on. Yeah.
I knew it was too nice, too good to be true there.
No, but hey, anybody listening, we're going to be going live again tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard. We got the Atheist Mom. It's going to be a collaboration with the guys. So if you want to tune in, but other than that, thank you again, Adam. We do appreciate it.
Yeah.
And we'll be seeing you guys soon.
All right, man. See you.